Antarctica is the most photographed place on Earth that almost no one has actually seen. It is larger than the United States and Mexico combined, covered by an ice sheet nearly 1 meter thick, guarded by winds faster than race cars, and a cold that can freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. Yet every year, cameras continuously return from that white silence with images that seem impossible to exist. Perfect rectangles floating on the sea, a pyramid rising from the snow, a waterfall like blood. Today we will look at 16 photos taken at the end of the world. When picturing Antarctica, people often think of permanently frozen ice sheets. That image is incorrect. In 2023, a study led by Brazilian paleobotanist Joseline Manfroy unearthed scorched plant fossils from King George Island and discovered something almost unimaginable. 75 million years ago, this frozen continent was on fire. During the Cretaceous period, the same era when dinosaurs ruled, Antarctica was covered in living forests, and those forests burned. Not just once, not by accident, but repeatedly, fed by continuous volcanic eruptions tearing through the ground. Manfroy had hinted at this back in 2015, but more recent research proved these fires were not a rare coincidence. They were a regular feature of the landscape, a world of green trees and blazing red flames, where now only white remains. And the only reason we can read this story is the cold, which froze the evidence in place for 75 million years, like a sealed page from a vanished world. So if Antarctica was once warm enough to grow forests and burn them, what extinguished its flames? Volcanoes in Antarctica are not just a thing of the distant past. Today, there are still active volcanoes there. Mount Erebus, the southernmost active volcano on the planet. The mountain stands as a physical contradiction of ice and fire, roughly 1.3 million years old. What makes it so rare is what lies inside its crater. A boiling lava lake exposed to the freezing air, kept liquid by a short conduit running straight down to the magma layer below. Most lava lakes are hidden deep underground. This one appears right before your eyes. But geology is only half the story. In 2013, an expedition braving the extreme cold and total isolation entered massive ice caves created by the volcano's own heat, hidden deep inside the mountain. And in that warm darkness, they found life. Unknown microorganisms surviving in caves of fire enclosed by a continent of ice. So, Erebus does not just break the rules of where volcanoes can exist. It silently redraws the boundaries of where life can exist. A beating, fiery heart inside the coldest place on Earth. Now let us leave the ice and head into the surrounding waters. In the remote South Atlantic, near the South Sandwich Islands, the seafloor suddenly plunges into one of the deepest trenches on the planet. We did not even confirm its full size until the 1980s, when the first true seismic survey mapped its edges. The trench formed where one tectonic plate grinds beneath another, a process that generates violent earthquakes, underwater volcanoes, and pressure that most living creatures cannot withstand. And almost no one has ever been down there. The location is incredibly hostile. Freezing water, fierce storms, and rough seas are so intense that they keep research vessels away for years at a time. That means this trench, deeper than most mountains are tall, sits in almost total darkness, largely unstudied, right here on our planet. We have sharper maps of the surface of Mars than of the bottom of this trench. So the only question left is the one that keeps explorers awake at night. Whatever creatures have adapted to live down there, in the intense cold and thick darkness, what do you think they look like? Comment the number 1 if you are also curious about this. Evolutions to adapt to an environment often bring an unavoidable consequence that their physical appearance will also change. In 2014, scientists found a completely new species of fish in the water hidden beneath ice more than half a mile thick. For years, experts maintained that no creature could survive there, isolated under such a massive, freezing weight. This tiny fish proved them wrong. It is not a fearsome predator. What makes it unsettling is what you can see. Its skin is almost completely transparent, so clear that you can look right through it and see the brain sitting inside its head. A living creature you can see straight through, floating in total darkness, in a place where life was not supposed to exist. At the bottom of the cold, dark Antarctic Ocean, scientists continue to discover creatures that look as though they just crawled out of a nightmare wearing a fruit costume. They named it the Antarctic strawberry feather star, and the name is no joke. Its body bears a cluster of small, round bumps, looking exactly like the seeds on a strawberry. Then come the tentacles. 20 tentacles, some short and bumpy, some long and soft like feathers, reaching up to 8 inches as the creature drags itself across the seafloor. Marine biologist Greg Rouse and his team at the University of California, San Diego described it in a recent study. Those strawberry-like bumps are not for decoration. They are anchor points for tiny claw-like appendages the animal uses to grip onto rocks and pull itself along. Before this work, scientists only knew of a single feather star species down there. The research team found several more, including this one. That means the Antarctic ocean floor is hiding far more life than anyone ever counted. Before we continue exploring these mysteries together, please leave a like if you find the content interesting, so we know we are doing a good job. And do not forget to hit subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the upcoming revelations. Let us linger in that pitch-black water to admire one more creature, because this one is a giant. The giant Antarctic scale worm measures about 7.8 inches long and 4 inches wide. That might not sound very big until you remember that it is just a worm. Face on, it is truly unsightly. Its face is not exactly a face, but a fully retractable neck that pushes outward to feed, equipped with 2 sharp fangs on the upper jaw and 2 on the lower jaw. Those fangs tell us it is a predator, not a scavenger, actively hunting down prey instead of cleaning up leftovers. However, flip it over, and it becomes beautiful. The underside shimmers with rows of iridescent golden appendages that ripple as it glides over rocks, while its back is covered in tough scales that act like armor. It lives at depths of up to 1,640 feet, and it quietly helps the entire reef survive by recycling waste on the seafloor. So it is a fanged, armored predator with golden fringes patrolling the darkness down there. Next, we will head ashore to the south, into the Ellsworth Mountains, one of the most remote mountain ranges on the planet. Rising from the ice is a peak about 4,150 feet, roughly 1,000 meters, high, and looking down from above, it does not look like a mountain at all. It looks like a perfect Egyptian pyramid. 4 smooth sides meet at a single sharp point, sitting in the middle of a frozen desert. The photo went viral in 2016, and conspiracy theories naturally emerged. A lost civilization, an ancient monument buried at the bottom of the world. The real explanation is slower and stranger. Over millions of years, water seeped into cracks in the rock during the day, froze and expanded at night, and broke it apart piece by piece. When all 4 sides erode at roughly the same rate, you get this, a natural pyramid carved by the ice itself. That is almost certainly the answer. Almost. But standing there, staring at 4 clean, triangular walls in a place where no human has ever built anything, a part of you still wants the other story to be true. A waterfall about 5 stories high pours from the Taylor Glacier, but it is not white, blue, or clear. It is blood, red. Discovered in 1911, it baffled scientists for an entire century. No volcanoes, no pollution, no mines, just a crimson scar that refuses to freeze even at temperatures around 1 degree Fahrenheit. Then, between 2018 and 2023, they cracked it. The source is an ancient subglacial lake sealed beneath nearly 1,300 feet of ice, trapped in total darkness for at least 1.5 million years. The water in the lake is twice as salty as seawater and rich in iron. As soon as it hits the air, it rusts, turning red right before your eyes. But here is the part that stays with you. Inside that buried lake are living microorganisms, surviving without sunlight and without oxygen, sealed away since before modern humans existed. And it is not the only lake. Satellites have now counted 231 lakes hidden beneath the ice, some draining and refilling like a beating heart. Lake Vostok alone, which is the size of Lake Ontario, has been trapped under 2.4 miles of ice for 15 million years. We spend a lot of time editing the content and bringing you the most realistic perspectives. If you feel this content is valuable, please give the video a hype. That is the simplest way to support the channel to continue making more videos like this. This is a mountain range that human eyes have never actually seen. Buried beneath up to 4.8 kilometers of ice in East Antarctica is the Gemburtsev Range, jagged peaks roughly the size of the European Alps, completely entombed. We only know they exist thanks to radar and gravity sensors that can penetrate the ice. Scientists did not find a flat, eroded plateau underneath as expected. Instead, they discovered sharp peaks and deep valleys that look brand new. And that is the problem. Geophysicist Fausto Ferraccioli pointed out that such jagged mountains should have been worn away long ago. The fact that they exist suggests the ice sheet froze rapidly, sealing the peaks like a time capsule. Even stranger, the Alps are only 50 to 60 million years old. These buried mountains might date back 500 million years, to a time when continents were still colliding. So, a mountain range the size of the Alps, hidden, ancient, and almost perfectly preserved, lies right beneath your feet if you stand there. Not every photo taken at the end of the world is taken on the ice itself. Some come from the icy mountains standing in the way to get there. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed into the Andes, carrying 45 people, including a rugby team and their families. 27 people survived the crash, but they were stranded on the high peaks with almost no food, little warm clothing, and no way to call for rescue. The cold did what the crash could not, claiming their lives one by one. As days bled into weeks and supplies ran out, the survivors faced a decision almost too cruel to speak aloud. To survive, they ate the flesh of those who had died. Eventually, 2 of them hiked, trekking across the mountains for days until they reached men on horseback to find help. After 72 days, 14 survivors returned. It remains one of the most grueling survival stories ever recorded, and it leaves behind a quiet, uncomfortable question. Faced with that cold and that silence, what would any of us do? The next photo looks like nothing special, just a dirty wall of ice meeting gray water. But you are looking at the Thwaites Glacier, which scientists quietly refer to as the Doomsday Glacier. It stretches roughly 22 kilometers across at its widest point and acts like a cork. Behind it is a massive portion of the West Antarctic ice sheet, held back from the ocean. Warm water has been creeping in and eating away at it from below, pushing back the grounding line, the exact point where the ice separates from the bedrock and begins to float. This is why the word doomsday is used. If Thwaites collapses, it could drag neighboring glaciers down with it, and global sea levels could rise enough to redraw coastlines everywhere. No one can say for sure when or how fast. The honest answer is that the models still disagree. But that uncertainty itself is what leaves those studying it feeling uneasy. A single glacier, silently melting from underneath, holds the power to shift the entire ocean. Now look at a hole that has no reason to exist. In the middle of the Antarctic winter, when the sea ice should be at its thickest and most solid, a massive gap suddenly tore open in the middle of the ice pack. Satellites first spotted such a hole in the early 1970s in the Lazarev Sea, then watched it disappear by summer. But in 2018, the strangest hole yet appeared. A hole nearly 3,700 square miles wide, tearing open during the coldest months of the year. For over 2 months, it grew by 740%, then quietly sealed back up. For decades, no one could explain this phenomenon. Then, researchers at New York University Abu Dhabi found the answer. The main culprits were cyclonic storms. In one event, winds reaching 72 miles per hour and waves up to 52 feet high pushed the ice apart in all directions. These gaps, called polynyas, actually feed the ecosystem, acting like a doorway between the ocean and the sky for seals, penguins, and plankton. But as the planet warms, these polar storms are expected to grow stronger. This raises a question. If the cold is no longer strong enough to keep the ice sealed, what will happen to everything that relies on it? In 2022, a research team drilling beneath the Larsen ice shelf spotted a strange groove in their satellite imagery and decided to take a closer look. They dropped a camera down a vertical shaft of 1,140 feet, about 480 meters, into waters that should have been a dark, dead void. Instead, they found a crowd. Tiny crustaceans called amphipods swarmed the lens, some of which might be species no one had ever named. That alone would have made the trip worthwhile. But then the strangest thing of all happened. Down there, in almost total darkness, they also found phytoplankton, algae. The kind of organisms that normally need sunlight to make food, yet somehow thrive on just 1% of the surface light. Either these creatures figured out how to survive on almost nothing, or our understanding of how life works is flawed. This is exactly the kind of place scientists study when they wonder if life could exist on a frozen moon like Europa. Remember to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the next mysteries. In 2011, paleontologists in Chile unearthed the largest fossilized reptile egg ever found near Antarctica. This egg is 11 inches across, and for years, it completely baffled experts. It had no clear owner. Finally, investigative work pointed to it being the egg of a mosasaur, a giant lizard-like sea monster that once ruled the oceans alongside the dinosaurs, like an enormous shark with a taste for eating anything smaller than itself. The egg was a clue to a mystery about how these monsters reproduced. Its thin, soft shell suggests the mother might have dragged her massive body ashore to lay the egg, then quickly guided the newborn back to the safety of the sea before land predators could get to them. That theory fits the surrounding area because researchers found the skeletons of adult mosasaurs and their plesiosaur relatives nearby. You can picture the scene by imagining a creature the size of a bus dragging itself ashore in a world we will never see, racing against time to protect its young. Let us start with a photo that looks fake. A massive block of ice sitting in the vast ocean, with edges so straight they look like they were cut by a machine. But they were not. This photo was taken by NASA scientist Jeremy Harbeck on October 16, 2018, during a flight for Operation Icebridge over the northern Antarctic Peninsula. He looked down and saw an unbelievably sharp rectangle floating below, then another, and then another. Scientists call them tabular icebergs. The flat, tabletop-like shape forms when a block of ice calves off the edge of an ice shelf, fresh enough that the wind and waves have not yet rounded off the corners. The iceberg in this photo, later named Tabular B, had edges so sharp it looked almost engineered. So the science checks out. Mostly. Because here is the weird part. These icebergs can be the size of a small city, drifting silently across the Southern Ocean, and most of them have never been seen by any human being. We end with the photo that sparked 1,000 debates. For years, satellite imagery on Google Earth has shown a strange shape on the Antarctic ice. A neat trench, about 100 meters long, with an object nearly 60 meters wide sitting at the end of it, shaped, according to some, like a cigar. Russian researcher Valentin Degtyarev argued that the sharp geometric scar is the trail of a crashed and buried spaceship. Skeptics have a calmer answer. It is just a crevasse, a natural crack in the ice, nothing more. But defenders argue that this crack is exceptionally clean, exceptionally straight, and located deep in the remote interior, where such crevasses should not form. The story gets even stranger when you compare it to old reports. Flashing red and green lights near Antarctica in 1965. An unconfirmed story from the 1960s about Navy engineers finding a flying saucer-shaped object in the ice, followed by silence. And as the continent warms and the ice melts, whatever is down there might not stay buried forever. So what is it really? A trick of the breaking ice, or something waiting to be discovered? What do you think? But the most concerning thing is not what we find in those frozen frames, but what is being deliberately hidden from them. As researchers continue to uncover the history of the ice sheet, some off-course pilots have accidentally breached restricted areas, encountering anomalies that defy not only the laws of physics, but also our understanding of reality. One particular witness recently broke his silence, sharing his first-hand account of seeing a structural impossibility deep inside the restricted zone. A story so bizarre, it left the scientists interrogating him completely speechless. Let us listen to what he actually saw.
Modern whistleblowers still argue that there is more about Antarctica that is being covered up than we think.
Probably between remnants of the Third Reich and perhaps extraterrestrials as well.
Brian S., a former Navy officer, served on C-130 supply missions in Antarctica from 1984 to 1987. He had an Antarctic Service Medal and reached out to investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe in December 2015 with an email that detonated like a bomb. They told us it was an air sampling station. They lied. Brian wasn't a conspiracy theorist who spent his life chasing UFOs or looking for government cover-ups. Instead, he was just a regular military professional whose daily job focused completely on routine tasks like waking up before dawn, checking logbooks, calculating fuel, and flying standard cargo and rescue missions. His entire world was predictable and strictly followed the rules. But because Antarctica does not care about human routines, one unexpected rescue mission completely shattered everything he thought he knew about the frozen continent.
It was something I had never seen before, and something had scared those people to the point that they were almost scared of, frightened to the point of not moving.
It is the mid-1990s. Brian and his C-130 crew are stationed in Antarctica as part of the United States military's ongoing support of scientific operations on the continent. They fly routine supply missions from McMurdo Station to the South Pole, serving as a vital lifeline for the scientists working in that freezing environment.
Unfold everything that happened.
Our mission was just a science resupply somewhere out on the western side of the continent.
On every single trip, the military strictly ordered them to fly 20 miles around a highly restricted no-fly zone that maps labeled as a simple air sampling station. The crew never questioned this standard rule until the urgent day they received a surprise message changing their mission to rescue an injured person immediately. Because every minute mattered to save a life, the crew decided to skip the long detour and fly directly across the forbidden airspace, never expecting how much that shortcut would change their lives. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, one of the crew members glanced out the window instead of looking at his flight instruments and called out over the radio that he saw a massive, mysterious dark spot in the ice below. As Brian and his crew flew along the edge of the forbidden no-fly zone, they looked out the left window and saw something that was definitely not a boring scientific air sampling station. Instead, gaping out of the frozen ground was a massive, pitch-black hole in the ice. Brian estimated the opening was at least 135 feet wide, large enough to swallow their entire C-130 cargo plane, and shaped like a giant, perfectly neat football field. Because its edges were so straight and sharp, it was obvious that this wasn't a natural crack or a collapsed glacier. It looked like something intentionally built by engineers. Even more surprising were the clear snowcat tracks and supply routes leading straight into the dark void, proving that people were actively visiting and maintaining whatever was hidden down there. This discovery meant the crew had been lied to, because a simple station measuring the air does not need a giant entrance in the ice, nor does it require a strict 20-mile forbidden airspace to keep people away. After completing their medical rescue mission and returning to the main base at McMurdo Station, the crew was told to wait in a conference room rather than go to their normal meeting. A few minutes later, a mysterious stranger in green military clothing walked in, looked tightly at the crew, and brought up how they had violated the restricted airspace. Even though the pilot explained they took the shortcut to save a patient's life, the stranger simply looked across the table and delivered an eerie warning. What you saw, you did not see. Without making them sign any paperwork or threatening them with official punishment, the man turned around and walked out of the room. By using only spoken words instead of legal contracts, whoever sent that man was making sure they left absolutely no paper trail behind. The mysterious hole in the ice wasn't the only strange thing Brian witnessed during his time in Antarctica. During the winter of 1995, Brian and his crew were flying a completely normal, predictable supply mission at 25,000 feet, when one of the crew members in the back noticed tiny glints of light reflecting off the mountain peaks below. As Brian came over to look, the flashes quickly grew larger. They were climbing higher into the air. 4 or 5 silver objects were moving together, and when Brian joked that they looked just like flying saucers, the crew member smiled because he had been too afraid of sounding crazy to say it out loud himself. For the next 10 minutes, the men watched the objects move with an impossible speed and precision that no human airplane could ever copy. The lead disc would suddenly dart toward a mountain peak and stop instantly, and then the others would follow right behind it before zooming off in a completely different direction. These silver discs never sped up gradually. Instead, they moved instantly from a total standstill to blinding speeds. Brian later realized that the immense pressure from those sudden turns would have instantly crushed any human pilot inside them. Even though the discs never flew directly toward the cargo plane, they carefully followed it from a distance, almost as if they were keeping an eye on the crew. Strangely, the object stayed strictly over the mountains and refused to cross the nearby Beardmore Glacier, treating it like an invisible boundary line. Years later, secret government records revealed unusual heat patterns deep beneath those exact mountains at the very same time the discs appeared, suggesting that these strange objects weren't just flying around for fun, but were actually guarding something hidden in the frozen peaks. Do you think Antarctica is a hiding place for aliens? Share your thoughts. Out of everything Brian witnessed during his time in Antarctica, the story of the 15 missing scientists might be the most unsettling. Normally, every science team in the frozen wilderness must check in by radio every single day. And if the main base at McMurdo doesn't hear from them for 2 days, an emergency search and rescue mission is immediately launched. Since Brian's crew had originally dropped this exact team off at their camp in an area called Marie Birdland, they were chosen to fly back out and search for them after the scientists suddenly stopped calling in. When the rescue plane arrived, they circled the camp several times and noticed that the tents were still standing and the snowmobiles were neatly parked, making everything look completely normal from the air. However, nobody came outside to greet them, which was incredibly strange because a giant cargo plane makes an unmistakable roaring sound, and isolated scientists always rush outside to wave and look for mail or supplies. After landing on the ice, the crew walked into the camp and discovered half-full coffee cups and personal gear left exactly where it belonged, showing that the camp had been full of life just moments before it was mysteriously abandoned. For 2 whole weeks, the 15 scientists vanished without a trace, cutting off all radio contact with the outside world until they suddenly called out of nowhere and asked to be picked up. When Brian's crew flew back to get them, the scientists completely ignored the usual safety rules, which required loading heavy cargo before passengers, and instead rushed onto the plane as fast as they could. Throughout the entire flight home, they refused to speak, make eye contact, or answer any questions from the worried crew. They just sat in their seats with wide, terrified eyes and trembling hands, looking exactly like people who had just survived a major disaster and were still trapped in a state of absolute shock. As soon as the plane touched down back at McMurdo Station, military personnel immediately locked all of the scientists' equipment inside a guarded metal building and forbade anyone from going near it. Soon after, 2 mysterious men wearing business suits and heavy snow boots arrived at the base, gathered the flight crew into a meeting room, and strictly ordered them never to speak about the missing scientists ever again. Just like before, there was no official paperwork to sign, leaving the crew with nothing but a silent, frightening warning that they had better keep this dark secret to themselves. What Brian described next is perhaps the most shocking part of his entire story, because the massive cover-up he experienced wasn't just the work of one secret government agency or a single country's military. Instead, Brian claimed that every major country with a base in Antarctica knows exactly what is happening beneath the ice, and they have all secretly agreed to never speak a word about it to the public. To understand how wild this is, think about modern world history. Powerful countries like the United States, Russia, and China usually disagree on almost everything, from trade rules and borders to how to protect the planet. Yet despite being constant rivals, these nations have somehow found one single topic where they are in perfect, unbroken agreement: keeping the secrets of Antarctica. On paper, this cooperation looks official. In 1959, over 50 countries signed an idealistic agreement called the Antarctic Treaty, which legally declared that the icy continent could only be used for peaceful science, totally banning weapons and military bases. However, Brian's story suggests that beneath this peaceful public treaty lies a second, unwritten agreement that was never shared with the world. Instead of using lawyers and contracts, world powers enforce this secret rule through active spying, messing with people's minds so they doubt what they saw, and sending mysterious men in suits to make sure witnesses stay quiet. This leaves us with one giant question. Why would every major government on Earth agree to hide whatever is buried under the Antarctic ice? If Brian is right, the answer is that whatever is down there is so incredibly mind-blowing that it would completely break our current understanding of science, history, religion, and how governments rule. If only one country knew the secret, it would have leaked out years ago, or a rival nation would have used it as a weapon against their enemies. Because this silence has lasted for decades across generations of political enemies, it means either that a force more powerful than any government is enforcing the rules, or that what is down there is so genuinely terrifying that even the world's strongest leaders agree that silence is the only safe choice. Brian, however, believed it was a mix of both. In November 2016, Buzz Aldrin, the famous astronaut who was the second human being to ever walk on the moon, traveled to Antarctica for an exciting tour and research trip. Shortly after arriving, the 86-year-old astronaut had to be rushed away in a medical evacuation, which official reports blamed on the freezing weather harming his health. However, right before he was flown out, Buzz posted a chilling message on the internet that shocked everyone who saw it, featuring a picture of the frozen landscape underneath the terrifying words, "We are all in danger. It is evil itself." Although his managers quickly deleted the post and claimed he was just tired and confused, the strange message was fast forgotten as the busy news cycle moved on to other stories. Most people simply dismissed the tweet as the confused words of an elderly man struggling with the harsh weather. But the message takes on a much scarier meaning when you connect it to everything else Brian witnessed. If you look at Buzz's warning next to the story of the 15 scientists who came back shaking with fear, the mysterious men in suits who leave no paperwork behind, and the giant hole in the ice that was disguised as a simple air sampling station, the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. Even the silver flying discs that guarded the mountains with impossible speed point to the same hidden truth. When you combine all of these spooky clues, Buzz Aldrin's message no longer looks like a mistake made by a tired old man. Instead, it looks like a secret clue left on purpose by someone who wanted to warn the world about a real danger without getting caught by the secret agents who erase memories. In fact, his warning was exactly 7 words long, which is the same number of words the mysterious military stranger used to threaten Brian's crew when he said, "What you saw, you did not see." It seems that whether someone is trying to hide the dark secrets of Antarctica or warn us about them, the message always comes in exactly 7 words. Ever since Brian shared his story with the world, a growing group of independent researchers and satellite experts has begun hunting for clues in Antarctica using Google Earth, one of the most powerful digital tools available to everyday people. What these internet detectives have discovered is incredibly difficult for scientists to explain away. While scanning the frozen continent, users have spotted perfectly straight geometric shapes and highly symmetrical structures that look exactly like human-made buildings rather than natural blocks of ice. Most surprising of all are the giant, pyramid-like shapes poking out of the snow in remote areas that scientists rarely visit, with some appearing in neat little groups and others buried deep under layers of ancient frost. Whenever people point out these massive pyramids, mainstream scientists usually claim they are just natural rock towers created by millions of years of howling winds and scraping ice. While that explanation might make sense for one lone rock out in the middle of nowhere, it becomes much harder to believe when these perfectly shaped pyramids appear in neat clusters that match up with secret heat signatures and radar data. After all, the biggest limitation of Google Earth is that satellites cannot see through miles of solid glacial ice. However, special scientific instruments can see what is hidden in the deep dark. Over the years, advanced tools like ice-penetrating radar and airborne sonar have detected baffling secrets buried deep underground. These high-tech surveys have uncovered strange pockets of warmth, massive hollow caverns that do not match any known geological formations, and long, tunnel-like pathways that are far too straight to be natural caves. Although these incredible findings have been quietly published in boring, technical science journals to keep the public from noticing them, the clues become impossible to ignore when you connect them all together. When you take a map and line up those secret radar tunnels with the exact spots where Brian's crew saw the football field-sized hole, where the silver flying discs guarded the mountain peaks, and where the 15 scientists vanished into thin air, a chilling pattern finally emerges. These strange mysteries aren't just random accidents spread out across the ice. Instead, they reveal a highly organized, hidden kingdom that has been operating deep beneath Antarctica for a very long time. The wild theories about what might be hiding beneath the frozen landscape of Antarctica are not new, because they existed long before Google Earth, the Antarctic Treaty, or modern satellites were ever invented. For hundreds of years, legends have told stories of a mysterious continent at the bottom of the world that was once warm, green, and home to an ancient civilization that vanished completely before human history even began. The most famous of these stories connects the icy continent to the legendary lost city of Atlantis, suggesting that a highly advanced society lived there before the last ice age, until a massive worldwide disaster destroyed them and buried their home under miles of heavy ice. Even though mainstream scientists have dismissed this idea for decades, it has never been fully disproven, and the bizarre clues continuing to emerge from the deep ice make it harder and harder to ignore. As a mind-blowing example, historians often point to the famous Piri Reis map, which was drawn by a Turkish sea admiral way back in 1513. Incredibly, this ancient map appears to show the exact coastline of Antarctica, even though the continent wasn't officially discovered by modern explorers until the year 1820. Even more shocking is that the map doesn't show the shape of the outer ice. Instead, it accurately matches the shape of the actual rocky land underneath the glaciers. How an artist in 1513 could map a shoreline that was hidden under thick ice long before humans invented the advanced radar technology needed to see through glaciers is a historical mystery that no scientist has ever been able to explain. If an ancient civilization really did build a home in Antarctica before the Ice Age, then the football field-sized hole that Brian's crew spotted inside the forbidden no-fly zone takes on a whole new, thrilling meaning. That giant opening wouldn't just be a secret military base or a modern research lab. Instead, it could be a hidden doorway leading straight down to an ancient world that has been waiting under the ice for millions of years. If that is true, then the 15 scientists who vanished for 2 weeks and returned shaking with terror weren't just the victims of a top-secret government experiment. They were witnesses who were taken deep underground to see a world-changing secret, finally discovering what has really been living alongside us on Earth this entire time. What Brian saw changed him, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, not in the way that Hollywood would script it. It changed him quietly, the way that genuine knowledge changes people. He carried it for years before he reached out to Linda Moulton Howe. He remained cautious even then, choosing his words carefully, aware that the warning he had received in that debriefing room had no expiration date. His greatest concern, by his own account, was not for his own safety. It was for the truth to come out. For the public to understand that Antarctica is not simply a frozen wasteland at the bottom of the world. It is something else entirely. Something that every major government on Earth has agreed in silence to keep hidden. Something that has been there long enough to outlast empires. Something that, when 15 trained scientists stumbled upon it, sent them back to civilization looking like they had been fundamentally broken by what they had witnessed. We are left with questions that the official record refuses to answer. What is inside that football field-sized hole in the ice? What did the 15 scientists see during those 2 missing weeks? What are the silver discs guarding over the trans-Antarctic mountains, and what boundary are they enforcing? Why does the global pact of silence hold so perfectly across nations that agree on nothing else? And what did Buzz Aldrin see that made him type those 7 words before someone made them disappear? Nobody outside of a very small and very carefully managed circle of people does. Antarctica is hiding something. The governments of the world know what it is, and the people who have accidentally seen it have been systematically silenced. Not with paperwork, not with legal threats, but with the quiet, absolute authority of people who operate above the level of governments. If you want to continue exploring what's truly hidden beneath the Antarctic ice, click on the card displayed on the screen now, or find the link in the description. And if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming journeys. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed creating it. See you in the next video. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a vast, dense, ancient forest, completely isolated from the modern world. A place where rivers flow blacker than the night sky, where tribes practice traditions that would rewrite everything you ever knew about human civilization, and where a sleeping giant, buried beneath the swamps, could double the amount of carbon dioxide in our entire atmosphere. This is the Congo Basin, and what scientists have discovered is as terrifying as something pulled straight out of a horror movie. Deep in northeastern Congo, there is a people called the Mangbetu, and the first thing you will notice about them is the shape of their heads. For generations, the Mangbetu have practiced a ritual called lipombo. When a child is born, while the skull is still soft and malleable, they tightly wrap the child's head with cloth and cords to permanently elongate the skull into an impressive, long shape. This was not considered strange or frightening to them. Quite the opposite. An elongated skull was the ultimate sign of beauty, of high social status, and of superior intelligence. The longer and more dramatic the shape, the more elite you were considered. Although the Belgian colonial government banned the practice in the 1950s, that distinctive silhouette remains burned into the historical identity of the Mangbetu people. And here is where it gets even more fascinating. To show off these elongated heads, Mangbetu women created one of the most iconic hairstyles in human history. They would braid their hair tightly and weave it over a flared frame made of wicker or straw, creating a halo-like crown that fanned out at the back of the head, secured with long, polished pins carved from bone, wood, or ivory. But the Mangbetu were not just artists of the body, they were master builders. When the first Western explorers arrived in the early 20th century, they were stunned to find massive royal halls and meeting houses, some reportedly up to 164 feet wide, built entirely without a single central supporting pillar. The walls, inside and out, were covered in intricate geometric patterns identical to the designs painted on the bodies of Mangbetu women. Now here is the part that genuinely unsettles outsiders. The Mangbetu held a very specific belief about witchcraft. They believed that the power of a witch was not a spell or a curse, but a physical object living inside a specific part of the small intestine. And this mark of witchcraft was passed down strictly by gender. Mothers passed it to their daughters, fathers passed it to their sons. They even had a strict death compensation system. If a person died, they were considered to have died while in the care of their father's family. So the father's family was legally obligated to pay financial compensation to the mother's family, no matter what the actual cause of death was. But the Mangbetu were only the beginning, because not far away lived a people who turned terror itself into an art form. Who do you think they are? Join the discussion with us in the comments section. And by the way, where are you watching this video from? The Boa people are renowned among art historians for one chilling creation: their war masks, known as pongdudu or kapongodomba. Picture a mask with deeply hollowed concave facial planes, a wide-open mouth revealing rows of carved wooden teeth, and stark geometric stylization that almost looks like early Cubist art created decades before Picasso was even born. These masks served one purpose: to terrify. They were worn by the bravest warriors going into battle, designed to strike fear into the hearts of enemies and to fill the wearer with a sense of absolute, almost supernatural invulnerability. The most striking feature of these masks is the large, protruding, deeply pierced ears. And that was not just artistic exaggeration. It reflected a real practice. Both boa men and women pierced the hollow bowl of the outer ear and used large wooden plugs to stretch the cartilage into dramatic shapes. The boa were not people to be conquered easily. When the brutal regime of King Leopold II and later the Belgian colonial administration tried to force them into slave labor extracting rubber and ivory, the boa did not surrender. They launched a massive, organized armed rebellion and fought the colonial occupiers for 7 straight years, from 1903 to 1910, before they were finally subdued. Their society had a structure unlike almost anything else in the region. Before modern money existed, they used specially forged iron knives as currency, blades so valuable as raw metal and craftsmanship that they became the standard unit of wealth to pay debts, buy livestock, and pay bride wealth. And in their settlements, surrounded by living fences of impenetrable vegetation and wooden palisades, they built a large men's club at each end of the central street, the political and social heart of the community. But if you think the human stories are strange, wait until you meet the people who consider the deadliest jungle on Earth to be a loving parent. In the dense rainforests live the Bayaka people, and they have been studied for decades because of something remarkable. Bayaka fathers are the most involved fathers ever recorded in any human society on the planet. They hold, soothe, and directly care for their infants during roughly 47% of their waking hours. They are so devoted that they will even offer their own chest to pacify a crying baby while the mother is away gathering food. This is a society with almost no gender discrimination at all. Men and women share equal decision-making power. Their roles constantly swap. Women are respected hunters, men are skilled gatherers. And because their main survival strategy, net hunting, requires total cooperation between everyone, Bayaka couples often spend up to 90% of their day side by side. But here is the part that will stay with you. The Bayaka do not see the jungle as a hostile wilderness to be conquered. They see the forest as Ndura, a loving, protective parent. When food becomes scarce or sickness spreads through the camp, they do not believe the forest is angry with them. They believe their parent has simply fallen asleep. And so their elaborate, haunting songs and ceremonies are not desperate prayers to an angry god. They are lullabies, sung with love, to gently wake their sleeping parent back up. Their music is so extraordinary that UNESCO recognized it in 2003 as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. They use a complex form of polyphonic yodeling, where multiple singers improvise completely different interwoven melodies at the same time, creating a dense, otherworldly wall of sound that echoes through the trees. Now we come to the Azande, and their world operated on a logic so different from ours that it is genuinely difficult to wrap your mind around. The Azande believed in witchcraft, but not the way you might think. To them, witchcraft, which they called mangu, was not a spell or a curse. It was a physical, oval-shaped substance that lived inside a person's abdomen, near the liver or the intestines. And here is the chilling part. A person could be a witch and harm others without even knowing it. Witchcraft was simply the everyday explanation for bad luck, illness, or why a granary suddenly collapsed. So how do you run a society where anyone could be an unknowing witch? You consult the chickens. The Azande relied on something called the Benj Oracle to make every major legal and personal decision. A ritual specialist would feed a highly toxic red powder to a small chicken while asking a yes or no question out loud. Whether the chicken lived or died was the answer. And this was not some casual superstition. The verdict of the Benj Oracle was considered absolute and legally binding, even for kings. The Azande were ruled by a strict hereditary royal bloodline called the Avongada, an untouchable aristocracy that had conquered and absorbed dozens of different ethnic groups. Their most iconic weapon was the kapinga, a terrifying multi-bladed throwing knife with 3 sharp curved blades branching from a central shaft, designed to inflict maximum damage when hurled into enemy ranks. It was both a weapon and a symbol of warrior status. And when someone died, the Azande never accepted that death was natural. They always assumed witchcraft was responsible. But instead of taking violent revenge, the grieving family would hire a witch doctor to perform vengeance magic, believed to act like an invisible heat-seeking missile that would silently hunt down and kill the witch responsible. Once a diviner confirmed the magic had done its work, the feud was over, and an endless cycle of bloodshed was avoided. But not every kingdom in the Congo ruled through poison and magic. One of them built an empire on art so obsessive that they were terrified of empty space itself. The Kuba Kingdom was one of the most sophisticated political systems in all of pre-colonial Central Africa. And unlike most African monarchies whose histories were passed down only by word of mouth, the Kuba kings commissioned wooden portrait statues called ndope to commemorate every single reign. But it was their philosophy of art that truly sets them apart. The Kuba were ruled by a principle called horror vacui, a term that literally means fear of empty space. They believed that nature was chaotic and that human culture was defined by order, geometry, and design. So they did not just decorate their royal treasures, they covered absolutely everything. Drinking cups, spoons, razors, pipes, cosmetic boxes. Every single surface was buried under dense, named geometric patterns until not one smooth space remained. Their royal attire, known as bwanchi, was a staggering display of wealth, made from cowrie shells, leopard skins, beads, copper, and imported cloth. The full outfit was so massive and layered that it weighed up to 185 pounds, about the weight of a grown man. It took hours for the king to put it on, and the crushing physical weight of it was seen as a metaphor for the burden of leadership itself. Kings were even buried wearing it. The golden age of the Kuba began in the 17th century under King Xiam Ambul Angong, and what makes him remarkable is that he did not build his empire through war. He traveled to neighboring kingdoms, learned their secrets, and came home to introduce revolutionary changes. New crops like maize, cassava, and tobacco, new weaving techniques, advanced iron smelting, and even the strategy game of Mancala, introduced specifically to sharpen his people's minds. But like the Azande, the Kuba also relied on a poison ordeal to determine guilt. The accused was forced to drink a toxic brew made from the bark of the ipam tree. If they vomited it up and survived, they were declared innocent. If they died, that was considered absolute proof of their guilt. Not far away lived a people who took a very different path. The Lega built no kings at all. Their entire society was held together by a single institution called Bwami, a voluntary association that wrapped religion, politics, education, art, and morality into one slow ladder of advancement. A Lega person spent a lifetime climbing the ranks of Bwami, learning a deeper layer of philosophy at every step. There were no chiefs and no royal courts. The wisest, highest-ranked elders simply guided the community through judgment and consensus rather than force. The Lega carved some of the most prized art in all of Africa, and yet they never made a single piece for decoration. Every figure and mask existed only to teach. They were memory tools, physical objects a teacher would hold up to remind a student of a specific proverb or a rule of how to live. One of the most famous is a small figure with many faces looking in every direction at once. To outsiders, it can look like a monster. To the Lega, it was the ideal leader, a person so wise and aware that nothing could happen behind their back. And then, deepest of all, in the dripping shadow of the Ituri forest, live the Mubuti, They have no chiefs, no police, and no written law. When two people fall into a bitter argument, the Mubuti do not punish anyone. Instead, a member of the camp simply begins to clown. They mimic the fight, exaggerate the shouting, act out the anger until it looks completely absurd, and the two enemies start laughing despite themselves. The fight dissolves. No judge, no jail, just ridicule used as medicine. The Mubuti also resolve tension between men and women through a game. The men grab one end of a heavy vine, the women grab the other, and they pull. But the goal is not to win. The moment the men start to overpower the women, a man will let go of his side and cross over to help the women. When the women start to dominate, a woman defects to the men. They keep switching sides, back and forth, until the whole camp collapses into laughter, having proven through the game itself that neither side can survive without the other. Now we leave the world of real tribes and real kingdoms behind, because deep in the misty mountains of the Congo lies a legend so dark that explorers have died chasing it. Hidden deep within the misty forests of the Virunga region lies the legend of the lost city of Zinj, one of the darkest mysteries on the entire African continent. The story begins with unimaginable wealth, pristine diamond mines buried deep underground. Legend says that King Solomon himself first discovered these mines and founded the city of Zinj. But to protect this priceless treasure from the outside world, the residents of Zinj are said to have conducted a chilling biological experiment. They crossbred the native Virunga gorillas into a monstrous new species. Not quite gorilla, not quite human, not quite chimpanzee. These creatures were said to possess terrifying intelligence and murderous instincts, bred for one purpose: to serve as the ultimate temple guards, crushing the skulls of any intruder who came searching for the diamonds. But despite all its wealth and power, Zinj met the same fate as every fallen empire. The city was suddenly and mysteriously abandoned, leaving behind nothing but moss-covered ruins and endless rumors. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the legend of Zinj haunted famous explorers like Henry Morton Stanley and Richard Francis Burton. And then comes the most shocking twist of all. When researchers dug into the oldest records, some claim that King Solomon may not have built the city at all. Some accounts suggest that Zinj was actually the legacy of a prehistoric civilization that existed before humanity itself, constructed from an indestructible, unknown metal. Now, it is worth saying clearly that the lost city of Zinj is rooted in fiction and folklore rather than confirmed archaeology. But the fact that it continues to haunt the imagination of millions tells you something profound about this region. The Congo is so vast and so unexplored that the human mind cannot help but fill the darkness with monsters. And yet, some of the most terrifying things in the Congo are not legends at all. They are real, they are measurable, and one of them is a river the color of pure darkness. Deep within the rainforests of the Congo flows a waterway called the Ruki, and it has earned a chilling title: the darkest river in the world. The water is a deep, pitch black, like liquid night, so dark that if you submerged your hand just beneath the surface, you would not be able to see it at all. Unlike most rivers that carry mud and silt, the Ruki flows through almost perfectly flat terrain. The secret to its blackness is an enormous concentration of dissolved organic carbon. Scientists describe it like a giant cup of tea. During the rainy season, vast areas are flooded for weeks, soaking the decaying vegetation on the forest floor and squeezing dark organic compounds into the water. But the color is not what frightens scientists. When researchers from ETH Zurich measured it, they discovered the Ruki contains 4 times more dissolved organic carbon than the mighty Congo River itself. And that raised a terrifying possibility: that this colossal amount of carbon was leaking from the peat bogs along the riverbanks, massive natural vaults holding undecomposed plant matter. If that carbon were ever released into the atmosphere, it could behave like a time bomb, accelerating global warming to a catastrophic level. For now, the worst has not happened. The river's incredible stillness has kept much of the carbon dioxide trapped beneath the surface. But beneath that black water, so dense that light cannot penetrate it, science still has no idea what truly lives down there. And that brings us to the single most terrifying discovery of all: a sleeping giant that could change the fate of the entire planet. Hidden right in the heart of the Congo Basin, scientists have discovered what may be the single most dangerous sleeping giant on planet Earth. It is called the Cuvette Centrale peatlands. Picture a dark, waterlogged swamp stretching across an area of roughly 56,000 square miles that is larger than the entire country of England. For more than 11,000 years, layer upon layer of dead and decaying vegetation has piled up here, unable to fully rot because it is submerged in oxygen-starved water. Over those thousands of years, this swamp has acted like a giant, silent machine, pulling enormous amounts of carbon out of the air and locking it safely underground. And the numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. With an average depth of about 6.5 feet, the Cuvette Centrale is currently holding up to 30 billion tons of carbon. To put that into perspective, that is roughly equal to the entire planet's fossil fuel emissions over 3 full years, all trapped in one swamp, in one corner of the Congo. But here is what truly terrifies the scientists who study it. All of that carbon is only safe as long as the peat stays intact and submerged in water. If human activity, things like draining the land, dredging, or clearing it for agriculture and palm oil plantations, causes the swamp to dry out, then oxygen would rush into those ancient layers. The decomposition would accelerate, and the entire process would reverse. Instead of locking carbon away, the swamp would begin pumping it out. Experts have laid out a genuinely chilling scenario. If just 1/3 of this peatland were to dry out and burn, the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere could immediately double. Global temperatures would be pushed up by an additional 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That would not be a slow, gradual change. It would be an irreversible climate catastrophe, triggered from a swamp most people have never even heard of. And just when scientists thought they understood the danger, a brand new discovery in 2026 revealed something even more disturbing. For years, researchers comforted themselves with one assumption. They believed that as long as the peatlands stayed wet, the ancient carbon would stay locked away safely underground. But a study published in February 2026 in the journal Nature Geoscience shattered that comfort. The same team of scientists studied Africa's largest blackwater lakes, Lac Mai Ndombe and Lac Tumba, along with the Ruki River. Using radiocarbon dating, they made a startling discovery. The carbon being released from these lakes was not new. It was ancient, between roughly 2,170 and 3,515 years old. In other words, carbon that had been safely trapped since long before the Roman Empire was now venting back into the atmosphere. What is happening is that microscopic organisms deep within the wet peat are actively feeding on this millennia-old carbon, releasing carbon dioxide and methane that travels through underground water flows into the lakes. The lakes then act like chimneys, breathing this ancient carbon out into the sky. Lac Mai Ndombe alone is estimated to vent over 150 gigagrams of ancient peat carbon into the atmosphere every single year. And this is where it becomes a warning for all of us. As climate change brings longer dry seasons, the water tables will drop, exposing even deeper layers of peat to oxygen. The population of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is projected to triple by 2050, driving more and more forest clearance. Less forest means less rainfall, which means lower lake levels, which exposes more peat, which releases more carbon, which warms the planet even further. It is a dangerous, self-feeding loop, and the discovery proves it has already started. But while the dark waters of the Congo hide ancient secrets that could threaten our very existence, across the globe, there are isolated peoples whose bodies possess superhuman abilities that defy everything we know about medical science. Click the video on your screen right now to meet the 1 in a billion tribes who can see crystal clear underwater, survive lethal poisons, and completely break every known law of human biology. Deep within the hidden corners of the world, beyond the boundaries of modern development, the Dark Continent is home to tribes that completely defy the laws of survival. They mark their strength and maturity by creating intentional cuts on their skin and through brutal stick-fighting rituals. They insert clay or wooden plates wider than 20 centimeters into their lips. They hang suspended in midair over water or confront lions directly. Let us explore the most isolated and mysterious remaining tribes on the African continent. Our first stop is the Omo Valley in southwestern Ethiopia, home to the Mursi, often described as the most dangerous and unpredictable tribe in the region. Here, hospitality is never guaranteed. You cannot simply walk into this land. Outsiders move with armed guards, and every step is taken with caution, because in the eyes of a Mursi warrior, survival and vigilance are the same thing. Here, the modern and the ancient collide in a way that is genuinely unsettling. Most Mursi men carry an automatic rifle, an inseparable tool for protecting their villages and their herds. But their most feared weapon is carved into their own flesh. Where their neighbors across the valley decorate themselves with white clay, Mursi men mark their strength with deep cuts in the skin. Those raised scars are not decoration. Each one can stand for an enemy defeated, a cold medal of honor worn for life. The women carry a different kind of defiance. From the time they are girls, around the age of 15, a mother or elder cuts the lower lip and inserts a small wooden plug. Over the following weeks, the plug is replaced with larger discs until a plate of clay or wood sits in the lip, anywhere from 3 inches across to more than 8. The largest ever recorded measured almost 24 inches around. And here the details matter, because for decades, travel magazines sold a lie. They claimed these plates were forced on women to make them ugly and worthless to slave traders, or that the size set a bride price in cattle. The anthropologist David Turton, who lived among the Mursi for more than 30 years, reject all of it. The truth is simpler and far stronger. The lip plate is a choice. It is a symbol of endurance, of self-respect, of a woman who is complete in the eyes of her own people. Their living places are also very special. Low and shabby huts with entrances so small that you have to crawl through them. A perfect defense against a nighttime attack. However, here is the quieter and harsher truth. Today, tourism is downgrading their culture to a mere commodity. A Mursi woman can earn about a few cents to 25 US cents for each photo a tourist takes, money that is used to buy grain, salt, and goods at highland markets. Tense encounters between camera lenses and people have sparked genuine resentment, and the Mursi are now organizing to defend their land and resist outside disregard. Where are you watching this video from? Do you think modern tourism is helping preserve the Mursi's ancient traditions, or is it slowly destroying them? We would love to know your perspective. Not far away, near the border region between Ethiopia and Uganda, lives a related people, the Suri, sometimes called the Surma. They are a brave, independent, cattle-herding tribe, and they turn their own bodies into living art. Using white clay and natural colors mixed with butter, both men and women paint intricate geometric patterns, lines, and dots across their faces, chests, arms, and legs. These are not just decoration. They are statements of beauty, identity, bravery, and social standing. Life here is harsh, with prolonged droughts and scarce water resources, but the Suri still move their cattle herds across the arid rocky hills with incredible confidence. And then there is the Donga, the famous and dramatic traditional stick-fighting ritual. To understand it, you must first understand what these young men put their bodies through. The day before the battle, the warriors purify themselves. They drink a special bark extract mixed with water to empty their stomachs, then fast completely until morning. They bathe in the river and paint their bodies with white clay in meaningful patterns, whitening their entire bodies to symbolize the freedom of youth and cattle herding. Then comes the part that sounds almost unbelievable. To gain a final burst of energy, they drink fresh blood directly drawn from a bull, believing it will infuse them with primal strength. Then the battle begins. 20 to 30 warriors on each side, almost naked to show their courage and disregard for pain, are equipped with wooden sticks about 6.5 feet long. It starts with gentle probing moves, but quickly escalates into powerful blows full of physical danger. But Donga is not an act of random aggression. It is a rite of passage, a way to resolve personal conflicts without resorting to dangerous, modern weapons. And above all, a way for a young man to prove his worth and win a wife. Even after the Ethiopian government banned it in 1994, it continues to exist in remote areas, a decentralized pressure relief valve for the tensions of the entire community. And as the sun sets, those warriors gather around the fire again, singing deep traditional songs and recounting stories of their ancestors. Leaving the arid valleys of East Africa, we travel west, crossing crashing ocean waves to reach the Bisagos Islands, scattered off the coast of Guinea-Bissau. On the remote island of Orango lives the Bijagos, and here, the rules of the world you know are turned completely upside down. This is one of the last true matriarchal societies on Earth. If among the Suri a young man must bleed to win a wife, here the power belongs entirely to the women. Women run the economy. Women uphold the law. Women head the households, and they mold the clay with their own hands to build their own homes. And in love, it is the woman who takes the initiative. She chooses her husband. She proposes, and she alone holds the authority to decide on a divorce. Meanwhile, Bijago's young men spend hours dressing in their most vibrant outfits, wearing jewelry and applying makeup, all in the hope of catching a woman's eye. But this is not oppression, it is balance. While women manage the finances and steer the future of the whole community, the men take on the physically punishing and dangerous tasks. They sail out to fish in rough ocean waters, and they risk their lives climbing crude palm ropes more than 65 feet into the air to harvest palm nuts, one of the island's most vital resources. And the power of Bijago's women is not only material, it is spiritual. The Bijagos believe women are born as perfect, complete beings. They are the only priestesses allowed to enter the sacred temples, and they are believed to communicate with the spirits. They even carry a sacred role as the bridge between life and death, their bodies believed to be resting places for the souls of deceased men, helping those men complete their rites of passage in the afterlife. For centuries, this isolation protected a society with almost no war. But the modern world is knocking. Young people are leaving for the capital, and the old customs are beginning to fade. Whether this kingdom of queens can hold against the storm of globalization is a question its elders are already asking. If you think this video deserves to be seen by more people, click the hype button right below. Every hype will help this video get recommended more. Leaving the peaceful kingdom of the Bijagos Queens, we head deep into the heart of the continent, to the domain of the legendary Congo River. It is one of the largest river systems on the planet and one of the most lethal. Yet right where the water turns most violent live one of the bravest tribes on Earth, the Wagenya. Their ancestors were once jungle warriors. Hundreds of years ago, fleeing bloody wars, they drifted to this stretch of rapids and made an almost insane decision. They would conquer the deadliest current they could find. They do not cast nets or paddle out in boats like ordinary fishermen. Instead, they build massive wooden scaffolds directly over the raging water, then lower woven funnel baskets of bamboo and rattan to trap whatever the river drags through. Why choose the most dangerous water on the river? Because the faster the current, the larger the prey hidden beneath it. Here, fishing is not a profession. It is a daily fight for life and death. One slip, one snapped rope, and the price is your life. The tension is so extreme that a fisherman hanging in midair will clamp the fish he just caught between his teeth, freeing both hands to keep his balance against a current trying to tear him loose. That courage does not come from nowhere. It is fed by a fierce belief in Mami Wata, the goddess said to rule the rivers and decide who lives and who drowns. To earn a place on the scaffolds, young Wagenya men train relentlessly, racing canoes by hand to build muscle and wrestling in the mud in fierce matches they call gabu. And the ultimate reward? When the water rises, the baskets can bring up a tigerfish, a carnivorous river monster with razor-sharp teeth, weighing as much as 175 pounds. Taking down a creature like that feeds the village and stands as living proof of human strength. Now we cross into the endless red sand dunes and arid plains of the Namib Desert in Namibia, home to the Himba, often called the Red People of Africa. Himba women are famous for skin and hair that glow a deep crimson. Every morning they coat their bodies, faces, and long braids in a mixture of butterfat, crushed red ochre, and herbal ash called oatjais. At first glance, it looks like pure decoration. It is anything but. In a place where water is the single most precious resource, reserved almost entirely for livestock and drinking, the oatjais is survival itself. It shields the skin from brutal sun, locks in moisture, and repels biting insects. It even works as a cleanser because Himba women rarely waste water on bathing. Instead, they cleanse with smoke, burning aromatic herbs and letting the smoke purify the surface of the skin. The color carries meaning too. Red is the shade of earth and of blood, the oldest sign of life there is. At the center of every Himba village burns a sacred fire called the Okuduwo, kept alive for years on end, never allowed to go out. The village headman guards it because that flame is the one eternal bridge between the living and the ancestors who watch over them. And the Himba protect themselves in a quieter, cleverer way as well. Every child is born into both the father's family and the mother's family at once. Anthropologists see this for what it truly is, a kind of social insurance. In a land where a single drought can wipe out an entire herd, belonging to two clans means there is always another set of relatives obligated to help you survive. When the heat finally breaks at dusk, the Himba gather at the fire to sing of their ancestors and pass the secrets of the desert down to their children. The Himba use red clay and herbal smoke instead of water to stay clean and protected. What is the most genius survival trick you've seen so far? Let's discuss it in the comments. Leaving the red desert of the Himba, our journey climbs back into the highlands of Ethiopia. But this is not the valley of nomads. This is a kingdom of stone and sweat, the territory of the Konso, the mountain people. Where the herding tribes are always moving, the Konso did the opposite. They rooted themselves into the mountainside and refused to leave. For thousands of years, with bare hands and iron will, they raised massive stone walls to guard their families and their land from wild animals. The harshness of the high country did not break them. It turned them into masters of agriculture, carving the slopes into endless green terraces that turn barren rock into granaries of sorghum and corn. Inside those walls lives a deep spiritual world. At the entrances to their villages stand the Waga, carved wooden statues that keep watch over the dead. They are not simple art. They are memorials to great warriors who fell after defeating an enemy or a dangerous beast. And everywhere, from the statues to the shape of the rooftops, the Konso honor life and fertility, an endless prayer for many children and full harvests. But labor alone does not make a man here. Beneath the ancient generation trees, an old test of strength still survives. Any young man who wants to prove he has come of age, ready to take a wife, must lift a stone weighing close to 110 pounds and swing it over his shoulder with his bare hands. No jewelry, no bloody duel. In Konso, raw muscle and the willingness to work are the only tickets into manhood. Now we come to a people who are perhaps the closest to the way of life that all of us once had on Earth. On the arid savanna around Lake Eyasi in northern Tanzania live the Hadza, one of the last true hunter-gatherer societies on the planet. There are only about 1,200 Hadza left. They do not farm. They do not raise livestock. They own almost nothing. And they have lived this way, virtually unchanged, for about 40,000 years. Genetic studies show they split from their closest neighbors, a people living less than 90 miles away, more than 15,000 years ago. Their language is a distinct branch, full of aspirated consonants, unrelated to any other language on Earth. It has no words for hours or days, and no true future tense, because the Hadza simply do not live for tomorrow. Every few days, when the food around their camp runs low, they roll up their few belongings, a bow, some poisoned arrows, a cooking pot, a few animal skins, and simply move on. At dawn, the men head out to hunt antelope, birds, and baboons, sometimes even confronting lions and hyenas head-on to reclaim a kill. The women forage with astonishing skill, digging tubers, gathering berries, cracking open baobab fruit, and harvesting wild honey high in the trees. Their knowledge of the land is staggering. They can identify hundreds of plant species for food, medicine, and tools, and they know which roots store water in the dry season. They even have an extraordinary partnership with a bird called the honey guide, which leads them to beehives in exchange for the leftover wax. Honey makes up as much as a fifth of their yearly diet, so this alliance is survival itself. But here is what truly stops me. There is no chief among the Hadzabe, no social hierarchy, almost no concept of private property. Everything found is shared freely. Researchers estimate they spend only about 15 hours a week finding food. Think about that. While we grind 40, 50, 60 hours a week chasing a future we are anxious about, the Hadzabe language barely even has words for the distant future or for measuring time in hours. They are not preoccupied with tomorrow. They live almost entirely in the present moment. Laughter comes easily, arguments are rare, and decisions are made together around the fire. We invented mindfulness apps to reach a state they have simply lived in for 40,000 years. But their land has shrunk dramatically over the past 60 years, and hunting bans now threaten the only life they have ever known. Now to the vast savannas of Tanzania and Kenya, where a ribbon of red cloth moves across the golden grass. These are the Maasai, perhaps the most famous warriors on the continent. Among the Maasai, strength is not measured by bulk. Agility, speed, and endurance are the ultimate survival weapons. Their traditional jumping dance, the adumu, is not just celebration. It is a grueling physical test, a bloodless arena where young men prove their spring, stamina, and warrior heart before the whole tribe. Even as the outside world races forward with technology, the Maasai preserve the most primal skills. They can spark fire from dry sticks in seconds. They build huts of mud and dung and ring their villages with sharp thorn fences to keep hyenas and leopards away from their families and herds. To them, cattle are a sacred gift from their creator, Enkai, and the savanna is their lifeblood. And living amid that lurking wild, they hold something the modern world constantly craves: absolute freedom and a soul unbound by the anxieties of time. In the far northeast of Ethiopia, spilling across the borders of Eritrea and Djibouti, lies a place that looks less like Earth and more like the surface of another planet. This is the Danakil Depression, a vast basin sunk roughly 200 feet below sea level, where three tectonic plates are slowly tearing the continent apart. The ground is a cracked crust of salt, broken by neon acid pools, sulfur springs, and volcanoes that never stop smoking. Daily temperatures can climb as high as 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and the average yearly rainfall is less than 7 inches. It is, by most measures, one of the most hostile inhabited places on the planet. And it is home. This is the land of the Afar, a proud people who would rather not be called by the old name Danakil, a term they find offensive. They are not victims of this furnace. They have mastered it. Their most famous trade is salt. During the dry season, the men carve large slabs from the flats by hand, blocks known as amole, that once served as actual currency across Ethiopia. The salt is loaded onto camels and herded into caravans, often 100 animals strong, with the men taking turns to shepherd them through the night and the blistering day, resting only when fatigue or heat overcomes them. The nearest market can be a week away by camel. Survival here demands knowledge that borders on the supernatural. The Afar know where rare water hides in ground that looks utterly dead, and during the dry season, many camp along the green belt of the Awash River. Their society runs on fierce independence, deep family loyalty, and unwritten codes of honor. Fittingly, this brutal cradle is also where Lucy, one of our oldest known ancestors, was unearthed in 1974. The Afar still live where humanity itself may have begun. Along the banks of the White Nile, north of the South Sudanese capital of Juba, the dawn arrives wrapped in smoke. Hundreds of dung fires smolder across the grassland, and out of the haze emerge tall, ash-covered men and a sea of cattle whose horns curve toward the sky. This is a Mundari cattle camp, and here a single animal is worth more than almost anything a man can own. Their entire world revolves around the Ankole Watusi, a horned breed known as the cattle of kings. Those horns can stretch as wide as 8 feet, and a single cow can cost between $400 and $600, while the cattle also serve as the bride price a young man must pay to marry. Each bull is named, pampered, and guarded like family. What looks shocking to an outsider is, on closer inspection, ingenious. Every morning the Mundari cover their bodies in fine white ash from burned cow dung, which protects the skin from sun and insects and acts as a natural antiseptic. They also use the ash as toothpaste and to massage their cattle twice a day. Young men douse their heads in streams of cow urine, believed to prevent infection, which also tinges their hair orange. They almost never eat their cows, living instead on milk and on the deep bond between human and animal. But this devotion carries a heavy cost. Because cattle mean wealth, status, and survival itself, they are a target. Across the region, raiders steal roughly 350,000 cattle and kill more than 2,000 people every year, so the Mundari guard their herds through the night with rifles in hand. As evening falls, the camp comes alive. Men sing to the beauty of their bulls. Children as young as 5 help tend the herd, and the low hum of 1,000 cattle rises into the smoke like a hymn. But while these African tribes have mastered survival in the harshest environments on Earth, There are other isolated humans scattered across the globe whose very bodies completely defy the laws of medicine, from surviving underwater like fish to possessing the healthiest hearts ever recorded. Click the video on your screen right now to discover the 1 in a billion tribes that modern science simply cannot explain.
A young girl growls in an attic in Poland on New Year's Eve. A young woman is chained to the floor on the second story of an old house. A pale hand reaches out from inside a coffin, and a cemetery worker might have brought something home. These are 20 of the most bizarre moments ever caught on body cameras. We will show you the incidents from a first-person perspective, what witnesses claim, and what the records state. Then leave the final decision up to you. Let us get started. In Moab, Utah, in August 2021, police pulled over a white van after receiving a call reporting a domestic violence incident involving a young couple. That couple was 22-year-old Gabby Petito and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. Initially, it seemed like just a routine traffic stop, but it was not. When officers separated them, Gabby was shaking and crying, barely able to speak. She told them she had severe obsessive-compulsive disorder and repeatedly apologized for being rude. Brian remained calm. He smiled, acted friendly, and said he only pushed her away from the car so things would calm down. The officers noticed scratches on his face and hands, and they considered Gabby the aggressor, separating the two for the night. They were later released completely, even though another caller had reported seeing Brian hitting Gabby earlier that day. Tragedy continued to strike. Just days later, Gabby went missing. Then her body was found in Wyoming in September of that year. Brian, the prime suspect in this incident, was later also found dead, with a notebook admitting he had ended her life. How would you feel if you were the police officer in this situation? Would you feel remorseful for not intervening more aggressively? Let us know in the comments section. In Fairfax County, Virginia, in September 2024, police officers arrived at an apartment for a routine wellness check. A doctor had requested they visit a 33-year-old woman named Sydney Wilson. Officer Peter Liu knocked on the door and tried to speak to her through the crack. She peeked out, then slammed it shut. He kept a calm tone and continued trying. At first glance, it seemed like a normal, slow-paced encounter, until it was not anymore. When she finally opened the door, she suddenly slashed his face with a knife. Liu backed into the hallway, telling her to stop and drop the weapon. She kept coming. He backed down the narrow hallway until there was nowhere else to go, and he was forced to open fire. Even then, she did not go down immediately, continuing to slash at him a few more times before collapsing. Other officers arrived and attempted first aid. Liu survived. The footage is very difficult to watch, and is mostly just heartbreaking. Many viewers believe she acted as if possessed by a dark force, while another faction believes she acted that way because she was experiencing psychological issues. In a small village in Poland, on New Year's Eve 2022, police were called to a family's home after a young woman named Kamilka locked herself in the attic. Upon arrival, officers were told she had locked herself in a tight space and refused to come out. Her family said she had been exhibiting bizarre behavior for a while. There were reports she had been messing around with a Ouija board. So far, it seemed like a difficult night for a family, but things got weirder. Up in the attic, Kamilka refused to speak normally. Instead, she let out low growls like an animal and remained stuck in the tight space, ignoring all attempts to persuade her to come down. Officers tried to calm her, but she remained aggressive and continued making similar noises. The video quickly went viral online, fueled by rumors that she was possessed after touching that board. It was undeniably disturbing. It also clearly looked like a mental health crisis. She was taken to the hospital. Possessed, or someone truly experiencing mental health issues. Make your own decision and let us know your choice. In Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, around 2011, police were quietly investigating a series of reports about disturbed and damaged graves. The trail led them to the apartment of a man named Anatoly Moskvin. On camera, the place looked like the home of a hoarder, with a strange fondness for life-sized dolls. The problem lay with those dolls, because some of them were not actually dolls. Moskvin was a linguist, highly educated, and fluent in many languages, but things were not as normal as they appeared. Moskvin was obsessed with cemeteries, often walking through them for hours and traveling long distances to visit graves. He once said he had visited over 700 burial sites, sometimes even sleeping among them. When police searched his home, those life-sized figures turned out to be preserved human remains he had taken from graves, dressed in clothes, and arranged around the rooms. He claimed he believed they could be brought back to life somehow, and that he could hear them calling out to him. He was arrested, declared unfit to stand trial, and sent to a psychiatric hospital. In Louisville, Kentucky, in August 2023, police received a call from neighbors who heard a woman screaming from the second floor of a house. Initially, everyone just thought it was a routine disturbance call, but the reality was completely different. When police arrived, the entire first floor was barricaded. The doors were blocked, the windows tightly locked. They had to use a ladder to reach a second-story window. Inside that room, they found a crying and trembling woman, a heavy metal chain locked tightly around her neck and bolted straight to the floor. An officer had to use an axe to break the chain to remove the rest of it from her neck. According to the arrest report, following an argument, the boyfriend had assaulted and threatened the girl. Then the boyfriend left and locked her in the upstairs room. Police later arrested the 36-year-old man. This is one of the rare pieces of footage that ends with someone surviving. But think about how much danger they were in. We spend a lot of time recording and bringing you the most realistic perspectives. If you find this content valuable, give the video a hype, as it is the simplest way to support the channel to continue making more videos like this. In Ohio, in 2022, police body camera footage captured the arrest of a woman named Irene Bedard. You might not recognize the name, but you certainly know her voice. She was the voice actor for the character Pocahontas. For most of the footage, it was a difficult arrest. Then things changed. The officers were trying to calm her down as she stood at the end of a hallway. Suddenly, she started screaming that she did not know what that was, over and over again. Her voice sounded genuinely terrified, and as she stood there screaming, viewers of the footage noticed a blurry figure moving low, right at her feet. Viewers began to question whether some spirit had possessed her. I will not speculate on that myself. She was clearly going through something serious, and being possessed by a ghost is just one of many more plausible explanations. In Truman, Arkansas, in December 2025, police received a call about a foul odor coming from a house. Complaints about foul odors are very common, but this case was not. When officers entered, the first thing they noticed was the filth. Fleas were crawling all over the floor. Garbage was scattered everywhere. The place was virtually unlivable. In the yard, they found small bones. Then they opened a freezer. Inside were the frozen remains of a dog and 24 cats, and investigators said some of the cats had been frozen while still alive. The house was home to the couple Bodie Williams, 38, and his girlfriend Samantha Platts, along with a child. The couple was arrested. Williams took a plea deal for 1 count of aggravated animal cruelty. He avoided prison time and received 36 months of probation, was banned from contacting animals, and had to pay court fees over time. Platts is facing over 24 counts of animal cruelty, plus 1 count of endangering a minor, and has yet to go to trial. The story behind this tape takes place at a home in Iowa, where the new owner supposedly found an old tape in the attic in 1973. The content on the tape is unforgettable. The footage shows an unidentified man going through what looks like full demonic possession. His movements are erratic and unpredictable. He makes low, non-human sounds, and at times it looks as if something is pressing from under his skin, trying to escape. There is a real debate over whether the footage is real or simply a very elaborate staging. The static, the lighting, and the lack of any authenticating source all point to this being a staged performance. But staged or not, it is still very effective, and that is exactly why it keeps going viral. We are not claiming it is real. We are simply putting it in front of you so you can judge for yourself. For a horror movie fan, it meets all expectations. So, is this a genuine artifact or a talented performance? In Federal Way, Washington, around 9 a.m. on May 6, 2022, a coworker called the police after 41-year-old Richard Laviolette failed to show up for work. She was worried and slightly suspicious of his roommate, Nicholas Van Cleve, stating the two had gotten into an argument. Police knocked on the door, got no answer, and left. By that afternoon, they returned with Richard's family. Van Cleve opened the door, and immediately something was off. He told the family they should not come inside, that he would check the room himself. He said Richard had gone camping, even though his phone and car were still there. He constantly blocked the stairs, insisting no one go upstairs. An officer persuaded him to step outside for a smoke. The family went upstairs anyway. In the bedroom, they found 2 large trash bags marked in red. One bag clearly containing human remains. More remains were found in the closet. The medical examiner determined Richard had been struck in the head and then dismembered. Van Cleve being declared unfit to stand trial only made viewers more frustrated and concerned. If you enjoy mysterious and dramatic content, do not hesitate to give the video a like and share it with those who have similar interests. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next terrifying mystery explorations. In Colombia, on February 26, 2019, the government demolished one of Pablo Escobar's old properties. A planned demolition witnessed by a crowd is a highly documented and publicized event, but the cameras captured more than just a building collapsing. As the structure was destroyed, some bystanders reported seeing a pale, transparent figure moving inside at an impossible speed. A man filming the demolition apparently caught the sight. On one of the balconies, a white, transparent shape seemed to dart across the frame, moving as if trying to escape before the walls came down. Part of the reason this footage is considered one of the most compelling of its kind is because it was not just one person. Others in the crowd also reported seeing the same figure inside during the demolition. Skeptics argue it could be due to dust, debris, motion blur, and the brain's habit of finding human shapes in chaos. But the witnesses remain steadfast about what they saw. So was it a human figure fleeing a collapsing house, or just something the dust and dirt happened to suggest? On an ordinary night, an American man was live streaming when he saw a strange object fall from the sky nearby. He approached to investigate and found a metal sphere lying on the ground. Getting closer, he heard a low humming sound coming from it, almost like a drone. He did something most of us would not do, which was to touch the object with his bare hands. He was not electrocuted, but immediately noticed it was very cold. He took a stick and tapped it. The sphere was solid. When he flipped it over, the other half was warm. And when he wiped away the dirt, a strange symbol was engraved on the surface. Online, viewers compared it to what some call the Booga spheres, smooth and solid metal spheres with strange markings that have allegedly appeared all over the world. Some say it is advanced technology. Others say it is something extraterrestrial. No one has a clear answer. On a dark highway in Bangladesh, late at night, a driver traveling on the road spotted a fallen tree blocking the way ahead. He slowed down and began honking his horn, perhaps thinking someone would step out and explain the obstruction. In a moment, men carrying weapons appeared on the road and started walking straight toward the car. The driver realized the man was holding what looked like a machete. The fallen tree suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. It was a trap. The entire situation was a trap set to stop a vehicle exactly where they wanted it. The driver quickly reversed, fleeing the scene before the group could approach. He narrowly escaped. We do not know if those men were caught or not, or how many other drivers had stopped at that same tree. What would have happened if the man had initially chosen to get out of the car to inspect the fallen tree? Leave a comment below. In Saudi Arabia, a YouTuber exploring an abandoned building walked through an old, crumbling house and climbed up to the roof. Initially, it was just standard urban exploration footage, dusty rooms and crumbling walls. Then everything changed. As he walked past a clothesline, a small gap between the hanging fabrics revealed a face. That alone was startling enough. But this was no ordinary face. The person appeared to have completely black eyes, with no whites, and disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared. The explorer immediately began to pray, which is understandable. Running away was probably another good option. Since the footage was shot in Saudi Arabia, many viewers suggested this was no ordinary ghost. They pointed out it was a jinn, beings in Islamic tradition believed to have the ability to turn invisible, shape-shift, and sometimes cause trouble, or even possess humans. Others thought it was a trick of the light, someone hiding, or a staged scare. The clip is short and does not provide many clues. A jinn, a prank, or just an illusion? You decide for yourself. On some public road, a police dashcam was recording Officer Wayne Daniels pursuing a white car driving erratically, weaving through traffic as if it had a mind of its own. The driving was extremely reckless, almost as if the car was driving itself. Initially, it was just a routine pursuit, until things changed. The car suddenly jerked hard to the left and crashed straight through a fence, and then it mysteriously vanished. All Officer Daniels could do was sit there and watch the car fade away, disappearing behind the broken fence in front of him, with no idea where it went or how it kept moving. Most pursuits of this kind end with the car spinning out, crashing into a barrier, or the driver giving up. But this pursuit just ended with an empty road and a hole in a fence. Surely there is a simple explanation: a panicked driver slamming the gas pedal across an empty field. But the footage does not give you that peace of mind. So what do you think slipped through that fence? Share your theories below. This video was recently uploaded to TikTok and went viral very quickly. It was filmed by a young man sitting in the stands watching a soccer match, recording the action with his phone like thousands of other fans do every weekend. At first glance, nothing is unusual. But then one detail does not match up. If you look closely at one specific player, you can see he is wearing jersey number 18. A moment later, inexplicably, the number 18 has changed to 21. There are no cuts, no edits that anyone can point out, just a number that seemingly rewrites itself halfway through the video. People offer the familiar explanations: motion blur, compression artifacts, two different players, or simply a trick of the eye due to the jersey folding. But one theory has spread more widely than the rest. Some viewers insist this is a glitch in the matrix, a small crack in the simulated reality appearing for a split second. It is the kind of video that looks a little different every time you watch it. This incident involves no crime or ghosts, just the laws of physics acting unusually. The video shows a large, water-filled swimming pool located on an upper floor of a building. At first glance, it looks like any other normal pool, until the bottom gives way. The entire bottom of the pool suddenly cracks and collapses all at once. In a split second, the entire weight of the water crashes straight down into the parking garage below. What happens next looks like an indoor flash flood, a raging waterfall slamming into the structure, sweeping away debris and submerging the parked cars below. Where the bottom of the pool used to be, there is now just a gaping hole. No one offers a clear explanation. You are just left staring into a deep hole and a rapidly flooding garage. The most likely answer is a structural failure, a problem with the concrete slab or its supporting pillars, rather than anything bizarre. But seeing that much water disappear through a floor in just seconds is hard to believe. On a busy road in the Philippines, a young man was riding a motorcycle and filming on a stretch of road that has seen many accidents, a familiar road. Until something unexpected happens. Without warning, a figure appears and lunges straight toward the motorcycle. The rider instinctively turns back to look, but the figure has vanished as if it had never been there. What bothers him most is the detail he kept repeating afterward. He insists the figure had no face, no features whatsoever, just a flat gray surface. Because it appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye, and because of that featureless appearance, he is convinced it could not have been a normal person crossing the road. The footage quickly went viral, with viewers split into two camps, one believing it to be a real paranormal phenomenon, the other seeing it as a simple case of a pedestrian, a shadow, or a camera glitch capturing a badly timed moment. The footage is short and leaves plenty of room for debate. This video was originally filmed by a girl in Florida and uploaded to TikTok before spreading across other platforms. It starts out as a common sight, a bright streak of light flying up into the night sky. At first, they thought it was a shooting star, but it was not. The light ascended steadily, getting higher and higher, until it suddenly disappeared from sight. A few seconds later, it reappeared, still moving, but now looking different. A faint white halo, like a cloud, formed around the object, and the two people filming grew increasingly anxious, asking each other what they were looking at. Because it was filmed in Florida, many viewers assumed it could be a SpaceX launch from Cape Canaveral, where rocket exhaust in the upper atmosphere can create exactly those kinds of plumes and halos. But that did not put an end to the speculation. Others argued the video supports the firmament theory, an old idea suggesting the Earth is covered by a solid dome that rockets cannot penetrate, claiming the disappearance in the halo indicate the rocket hit that barrier. In La Plata, Argentina, in 2023, a man and his friends went exploring the city's vast historical cemetery. A massive area built in 1886 with thousands of people buried inside. They were just filming a walk through the ancient catacombs, the kind of video people upload without thinking much about it. As they walked past one of the coffins, a pale hand appeared, reaching out from inside, then quickly retracted. It happened so fast that the men did not even realize it at the time. The explorer uploaded the video with a casual title and said nothing about the hand because he never saw it. Only later, when viewers spotted it in the background, did people begin pointing it out in the comments section. What makes it hard to dismiss is the context. The catacombs are old, decaying, and unstable, and the wood of that coffin is very fragile. The idea of someone climbing inside to stage this is almost impossible and highly dangerous to attempt. So was that hand something supernatural, or can you think of any other explanation? Share below. In Herkimer, New York, a man named Nate, who works at Oak Hill Cemetery, uploaded videos of a typical day on the job. One morning, while unlocking the building, he recounted hearing rustling and movement before anyone else had arrived. A groundskeeper hearing strange noises in an old cemetery is easy to shrug off, but then things got more serious. While working near a grave, Nate heard loud noises from the tree line, heavy footsteps stomping on the ground, way too heavy for a squirrel. He turned around, thinking it was a deer, but nothing was there. Viewers told him to isolate the audio and amplify it to listen. He heard a soft whisper, like a child's voice, seemingly saying, "You are close to me." After that, strange things seemed to follow him. A heavy sack swung as if it had been struck. A door moved on its own. He said he saw someone walk into a locked shed. A saw fell down without anyone touching it, and then an axe dropped and startled him mid-recording. Taken one by one, each moment has a logical explanation. Coupled with that whisper, many viewers think something attached itself to him at the cemetery. But at least, with a body camera, you know for sure someone is right there with you. The truly chilling feeling does not come from violently shaking camera angles, but from the silence. From the lifeless eyes silently watching you from above, right in the place you feel safest. Next time you take a stroll through a crowded mall, perhaps you will want to look up at the ceiling.
Alien creatures found frozen in the snow in Quebec. Giant figures filmed moving on a remote hill. A strange being lurking just beyond the glow of a campfire. And much more.
Холод. Смотрите, там он. Огромный кусок, как из фильма.
What you are about to see are mysterious creatures that do not come from Earth. The first piece of footage comes from the Appalachian Mountains in the United States. A woman uploaded a recording from a security camera mounted on her property, and what it captured is genuinely hard to look away from. It was not just one figure, it was two. As these things passed in front of the camera, you could clearly see them moving on all fours, low to the ground, crawling. They walked out of the frame, and then, a moment later, they circled back and reappeared. But this time, something had changed. This time, they stood upright. They rose onto two legs and began to walk. For just a second, they looked almost human, but not quite. They were extremely thin, with glowing eyes and no hair at all. And the way they moved was the worst part. Small, clumsy, stumbling steps, as if they were not used to standing like that. As if walking on two legs was something they were still learning to do. In the comments, people threw out every theory you can imagine. Some said it was a rake. Others insisted it was a skinwalker. A few were convinced it was a Wendigo. What do you think it is? Now we travel north to the frozen wilderness of Quebec, Canada. Back in October 2008, someone uploaded a video to YouTube with a chilling title, "Real Alien Body in Quebec, 1992. The clip shows snowmobilers stumbling across what appears to be a frozen extraterrestrial body, half buried in a deep snowbank. By January 2016, the original video had racked up over 430,000 views, and the copies spreading across the internet had pushed that number into the millions. This one actually got investigated. A researcher from a Quebec organization looked into the case. A journalist from a local newspaper near the Rouge River Valley was even contacted. But here is where it gets strange. The original YouTube account that uploaded the footage no longer exists. Two of the earliest accounts that reshared it have also vanished. The identities of the snowmobilers were never confirmed. And to this day, the case remains unsolved. Do you think the real alien corpse in Quebec is real? Join our discussion in the comments section below. And by the way, where are you watching this video from? Next, we move to an open meadow, somewhere remote and quiet, where a researcher on a field trip captured something that defies every form of classification we have. In the middle of the field stood a figure. It was impossibly tall and thin, balanced on two long, spindly legs, with a broad, dark upper body that spread out above it like the canopy of a tree. The proportions were all wrong. Biologically, it made no sense. Nothing built like that should be able to stand, let alone move. And then it moved. A bird flew past, close to it, and the figure reacted. It shifted to the side with a smooth, calculated motion, dodging the bird as if it were aware, alert, thinking. And then, in an instant, it was gone. There 1 second, vanished the next. The researcher reportedly stood in that field for a long time afterward, just staring, trying to understand what the camera had recorded. Next, a park ranger and a night he probably wishes he could forget. A park ranger was on patrol late at night when this creature stepped out from between the trees directly in front of him. It was impossibly tall and gaunt, with antlers growing from its skull and long, spindly fingers twisted into grotesque claws. For a moment, it just stood there, staring at him. And then it lunged. It came straight at him. He held his ground and shoved it back. The creature staggered, took a few unsteady steps backward, and then threw its head back and let out a scream that tore through the entire forest. And then, like the others, it was gone. According to reports, rangers in that area had been receiving unusual reports for months leading up to that night. So far, we have seen things crawling on security cameras, frozen in the snow, vanishing from open fields, and screaming in the dark. But the footage that comes next moves from the deep wilderness into something much closer to home. A barn in broad daylight, a coastline crowded with witnesses, and a creature climbing the side of an apartment building in Russia. But before we continue this journey of discovery, if you think this video deserves to be known by more people, please press the hype button right below. Each hype will help this video be recommended more. A quiet cattle farm in the middle of the day. A farmer is going about his routine when he spots something inside his barn that does not belong there. It was small, hunched over. Its entire body was covered in wild, matted red hair, and its build was unlike any animal he had ever seen. He froze, and before he could even react, the thing bolted. It shot across the yard and disappeared straight into a nearby cornfield. Afterward, he searched the whole area. He walked the field, he checked the dirt, and he found nothing. No tracks, no fur, no trace that anything had been there at all. Just an empty field and the memory of something that should not exist. Some viewers said it was a goblin, others called it a duende. A few simply had no explanation at all. Now we travel to Mexico, to a quiet residential street where a neighbor noticed something wrong with the house next door. Acting on instinct, the neighbor pointed a camera toward the building in the dark, and what it captured is the kind of thing that makes you re-watch it just to be sure your eyes are not playing tricks. Something was scaling the exterior wall. It was pale, slender, and disturbingly frog-like, clinging to the flat vertical surface with long, elongated fingers and toes. And it was not struggling. It moved upward with an unsettling ease, smoothly, almost casually, the way you or I might walk across a flat floor. When the footage was zoomed in, it only got worse. This was not any known species of frog. It was not a lizard. It was not anything that should be able to climb a sheer wall like that. And the most chilling detail of all is how comfortable it looked. It climbed like it had done this many times before, like that wall was familiar territory, like it knew exactly where it was going. Whatever it was searching for inside that house, the owner had no idea it had ever been there at all. Now we head to the coast, to a beach called Playa Escondida, where a small crowd of dogs gathered around something the waves had pushed onto the wet sand. There were two of them. Both had dark, humanoid upper bodies, but where their legs should have been, they had fishtails instead. They lay exposed on the beach, the surf crashing behind them, while the dogs circled and barked. Then, for a brief moment, the dogs backed off, and one of the creatures seized its chance. It flapped its tail hard against the sand and dragged itself frantically toward the water, fighting to escape. The other one stayed behind. It was too weak to move, with a single dog standing guard over it. And what happened to that second creature after the camera stopped rolling remains a complete mystery. From a quiet beach, we now travel to the forests of Australia and to one of the most recognizable nightmares on the internet: Siren Head. Siren Head is a towering humanoid figure with a grotesque, skeletal body and two enormous speakers where its head should be. Those speakers emit sound, and according to the stories, that sound can be so loud it actually damages the hearing of anyone nearby. In March 2020, one was reportedly spotted in Australia, and when you watch the footage, it is genuinely unsettling at first. This enormous thing standing among the trees. But look closer at how it moves. The arms and legs are jerky, stiff, almost stuttering. Maybe its legs really do not work properly, who knows? The man filming it clearly could not believe what he was seeing, because he stops recording and runs almost immediately. Now we go to Russia, to one of the most famous pieces of viral footage ever captured. In this video, you see a giant, spider-like figure climbing the side of an apartment building in southwestern Russia. A massive creature with long, jointed legs scaling the facade like it weighs nothing. When this first surfaced, people were genuinely frightened. Some thought it was the beginning of some kind of invasion, and it was not a one-time thing. In a second video, a similar spider-like or stick-like figure was filmed climbing a building near Moscow. Some people are convinced these creatures are real. A few even suggested it was Slender Man. Others are equally convinced it was created with digital animation. Now we leave the ground entirely and look up at the sky over London. During Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee in June 2022, the ceremony was broadcast live on television, complete with a flypast from the Royal Air Force. But as the planes passed over Buckingham Palace, a strange object appeared near them. It looked like a sphere, and it flew right through the smoke trailing behind the aircraft. When you slow the footage down, the object appears to be moving much faster than the Royal Air Force jets themselves. And in a detail that people latched onto immediately, young Prince Louis was seen raising his hand at that exact moment, appearing to say something, and many believe he was saying, "This is not a bird. This is not a bird." So what was it? Was it really moving faster than military aircraft? Or is there a simpler explanation hiding in plain sight? Now back into the trees for one of the eeriest clips in this entire collection. There is a man who records all of his throat-singing videos out in nature, deep among the forest, surrounded by tall trees and silence. And in this particular video, he wanted to show his audience something genuinely beautiful. He wanted to prove that even the wild deer would stop and listen when he sang. And it worked. A deer paused nearby, drawn in by the resonance of his voice, frozen in place, ears turned toward him. But after the video was uploaded, the audience's attention did not stay on the deer at all. It shifted to what was standing behind it. Because back there, half hidden among the trees, were two figures. Tall, human-shaped shadows peeking out from behind the trunks. They did not move like animals. They did not look like animals. Some viewers became convinced that the man was unknowingly chanting some kind of spell as he sang, and that the deep, layered sound of his voice had pulled the spirits of the forest toward him. People filled the comments with theories about skinwalkers and woodland spirits drawn to the music. But the artist himself insisted that when he was out there filming, all he ever saw was the deer. nothing else. No people, no figures, nothing standing in the trees behind it. Our next clip comes from a cold, foggy, empty field somewhere in Russia, and it is one of the most elaborate things in this entire video. A man claiming to be a Russian secret agent filmed himself standing inside a crash site that the public was never supposed to lay eyes on.
Холод. Смотрите, там он. Огромный кусок, как из фильма.
Behind him, scattered across the frozen, fog-covered ground, lay several gray alien bodies. Long, thin limbs, smooth, pale skin, completely motionless, sprawled out across the dirt as though they had fallen from a great height. Beside each body sat a yellow forensic marker, the small numbered tents investigators place next to evidence. There were at least 12 of them, carefully positioned, one for each body. Behind the corpses, hazmat teams in full protective suits moved slowly and silently, working behind strips of yellow tape, while police cars sat parked in the mist with their lights off. This was not a single body. This was a whole field of them. And that is the detail that has kept people debating this clip for so long. If this many creatures came down at once, then the spacecraft that carried them must have been enormous. Yet there is no wreckage of that size anywhere in the footage. So where is the ship? What brought them all down? And why would a secret agent risk everything to film it and release it to the world? Now we lift our eyes to the night sky over Mexico City, where thousands of people witnessed something they could not explain. A cluster of mysterious glowing objects suddenly appeared overhead, hanging in the darkness above the sprawling city. The objects moved across the sky in a precise, deliberate formation, holding their spacing as they drifted, shifting together as if they were being guided by a single mind. That is the part that unsettled people the most. Random lights flicker and scatter. Planes blink and follow flight paths. But this was different. The way they held their positions, the way they turned and moved as one coordinated group, it looked controlled. It looked intelligent. Many who saw it became convinced that the technology behind those lights did not come from anywhere on Earth, that no human aircraft moves quite like that. And here is what makes this case stand out. It was not just believers who were shaken. Even longtime skeptics, people who normally dismiss this kind of footage without a second thought, admitted that the Mexico City lights made them pause. It made them look up a little longer. It made them wonder, just for a moment, what might really be moving around up there in the dark, far above the city, watching while the rest of the world sleeps. Now we go somewhere the public was absolutely never meant to go. Area 51. This piece of footage is grainy, shaky, and shot on a night vision infrared camera, the kind that bathes everything in that eerie green glow. And according to the story behind it, it came straight out of the Area 51 database, the most secretive military facility in the world. In the clip, a gray alien is seen fleeing a burning, crashed spacecraft. It moves quickly across open ground, low and fast, while thick smoke pours into the sky behind it, lit up by the flames of the wreck. The story goes that this footage was leaked by an insider, someone on the inside who had seen what was being hidden and decided that the public deserved to know the truth, no matter the cost. The crash, the fire, the desperate running figure, all of it captured on a camera that was never, ever supposed to leave that building. And it does not stop with one tape. Another leaked video surfaced online, and this one is arguably even more disturbing. This clip allegedly shows a living creature being held inside a secret, high-security facility. The being has a slender, fragile-looking frame and smooth gray skin. Its head is unusually large, far too large for its thin neck, and set into that head are two deep, obsidian black eyes that seem to soak up every bit of the dim light in the room. There is no white, no color, just two endless dark pools. And it moves. That is what makes this footage so hard to shake. It moves with an eerie, fluid quality, slow and deliberate, occasionally twitching its long, thin fingers against a cold metal table. You can almost feel how cold that room is just by watching. The image quality is poor, washed out and blurry, but you can still make out the steady rise and fall of its breathing. Whatever it is, it was alive when this was filmed. The video spread across the internet at incredible speed, and it reignited one of the oldest and most uncomfortable debates we have. If this is real, then we are not alone. And worse, it would mean that someone, somewhere, already knows that for certain and has been keeping that creature locked away in a cold room behind closed doors, hidden from every single one of us. Now we travel to a small shop in Yemen for a clip that genuinely rattles people who watch it. This footage was captured by a security camera mounted inside the shop. At the start of the video, everything is normal. The shopkeeper is standing alone behind his counter, going about his day. And then, suddenly, the door opens and a woman walks in. What happens next is genuinely hard to watch. The man later described her face as deeply, profoundly terrifying. Her skin was pale and gray, drained of all color, like something that had not seen sunlight in a very long time. And then she began to speak, asking him strange, unsettling questions in a flat voice. Who died? Why are you listening to the Quran? There was something deeply wrong about the way she carried herself, something that made the man's skin crawl. And in the comments, viewers pointed out things that made it so much worse. Many claim she did not have normal human feet at all, that where her feet should have been, there were hooves, like a goat. Others insisted that her eyes were completely black, with no whites visible at all. In Middle Eastern folklore, there are old stories of jinn, spirits that can take human form but always carry one small flaw that gives them away, like hooved feet they cannot fully hide. A great many people walked away from this clip convinced that the woman who entered that shop was not a human being at all. Now for something much closer to home, a living room. This video was uploaded in July 2025 by a woman named Rianne. It was, by every account, a completely normal day. She was sitting in her living room, relaxing, watching television, with a hairstyling mannequin head resting nearby, the kind used for practicing cuts and styles. There was nothing unusual about it. And then it moved. The head of the mannequin turned slowly on its own. At first, no one noticed. It is the kind of small movement your brain dismisses, something you tell yourself you must have imagined. But then it moved a second time. And this time, both Rianne and her young daughter saw it clearly. There was no mistaking it. The daughter was so frightened that she ran straight to her mother, and you can feel that raw, genuine panic in the footage. Rianne did exactly what any rational person would do. She checked behind the sofa, searching for a string, a wire, a draft from a window, a pet, anything at all that could explain how a solid plastic head had turned by itself. And she found nothing. No strings, no hidden mechanism, no logical cause whatsoever. Just a mannequin that moved twice in a quiet living room in front of two terrified witnesses. So what do you think really made it move? Now to a rural village in the Philippines. A viral video shows a local man being interviewed alongside a woman whose appearance does not match anyone or anything on the map. She had pale, almost glowing white skin, long silver hair, pointed ears, and crimson eyes that caught the light in a way no human eyes ever could. And the strangest part? She sat there calmly the entire time, smiling, completely at ease, as if there was nothing unusual about her at all. Now we end on the rocky, fog-covered coast of Jamaica. A group of tourists were exploring the rugged coastline, picking their way across the wet rocks, when they spotted a figure sitting alone in the mist ahead of them. As they got closer and looked harder, the shape began to make sense, and that is when the unease set in. It was the upper body of a woman, with long black hair that she was slowly, calmly stroking, running her fingers through it the way anyone might. But below her waist, resting on the wet rock, there were no legs. Instead, there was a long silver tail, catching what little light cut through the fog. She was turned away from them, facing out toward the sea, completely undisturbed, as if she had no idea she was being watched or simply did not care. And the strangest part is how the tourists reacted. No one moved. No one called out. No one ran toward her or away from her. They just stood there, frozen, and filmed in total silence. And in that fog, it truly felt like they were looking into a world that runs parallel to our own. We've seen what hides in the remote wilderness and the ocean's fog. But what happens when these entities show up right on our doorsteps and leave forensic experts completely speechless? Click the video on your screen right now to witness the Compton entity, the Las Vegas backyard anomaly, and more mysterious beings not from our planet that absolutely no one can explain.
The investigation surrounding Gene Hackman's death continues to reveal new developments. Recently released police body camera footage reportedly captured a surprising find hidden behind a section of wall inside the actor's private library. On February 26, 2025, Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found deceased inside their Santa Fe residence. Although officials later determined that both deaths resulted from natural causes, federal investigators continued examining the property. As their work progressed, attention shifted toward a mystery involving Cold War-era infrastructure, classified chapters of New Mexico's past, and a sealed subterranean chamber holding aging photographs, historical records, and unusual markings that specialists have yet to fully identify. Was Gene Hackman merely the owner of the estate? Or had he become the final protector of a secret that had remained buried beneath the land for decades? The true nature of Gene Hackman's New Mexico compound became clear only when observers looked beyond the typical image of a Hollywood retreat. Deep in the high desert, the actor established a property that resembled a military installation more than a private residence. Richard Castagnano, a seasoned security expert, reviewed the estate during an insurance evaluation in 2019. The security measures were so extensive that he initially suspected an administrative error in his paperwork. 23 acres of dense woodland formed a natural barrier, while 12-foot stone walls secured the perimeter. Thermal cameras, steel-reinforced gates, and motion sensors eliminated blind spots, creating a defensive network he considered stronger than those protecting some visiting international leaders. Employees were subjected to rigorous background screening and bound by strict confidentiality agreements covering both their daily activities and specific construction work. More suspicious than the visible defenses were the structures built underground. Miguel Reyes, a Santa Fe concrete specialist, joined the project in the early 2000s, expecting a routine contract. Instead, the plans called for underground sections with reinforced concrete walls 18 inches thick. After decades of constructing residential basements and wine cellars, he had never encountered residential specifications of that scale. The reinforcement strongly suggested bunker construction rather than storage. When Reyes asked about the excavation, management insisted it was only for storage. He was paid triple his normal rate and required to sign a 20-year confidentiality agreement that expired in 2024, 1 year before Hackman's death. Even after the agreement ended, Reyes could not describe the entire underground complex. His crew worked in only one section, while deeper excavations were handled by separate engineering teams with even higher clearance levels. Management repeatedly assured him that no lower levels existed beneath the area where he was working. Years later, investigators would learn just how misleading those assurances may have been. Because once the hidden entrance was opened, they began descending into a darkness no construction crew was ever supposed to reach. When the entrance to the tunnel was found, the air rising from below was damp and carried a smell one agent later compared to opening something sealed for a very long time. The passage was roughly 36 inches wide and descended at a steep angle. While the original stonework appeared nearly a century old, it was clear the builders had engineered something meant to last indefinitely. What did they intend to keep sealed inside? The descent lasted nearly 15 minutes. More than 300 feet below the library floor, the staircase opened into a vault-like chamber, approximately 40 by 60 feet in size. The chamber appeared carefully organized, then abandoned and sealed. Wooden crates lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Some had collapsed, scattering contents across the dust-covered stone floor, while others remained intact despite warped lids. Inside, investigators found documents, photographs, and metal instruments spanning multiple decades. Several photographs dated to the early 20th century showed groups of men gathered around tables covered with maps and technical drawings. Their clothing suggested the 1920s or 1930s. In several images, they appeared to be studying architectural or engineering plans. One photograph carried a handwritten date, 1937. The documents were even more troubling. Some were handwritten in fading ink on brittle paper, while others were carbon copies produced on government-issued typewriters. Several contained coded notations, partial lists of names, and references to events absent from public records. Some pages showed burn damage, suggesting someone had attempted to destroy the archive, but abandoned the effort before completing it. Scattered among the papers were drafting compasses, measuring tools, and mechanical components resembling early surveying equipment, exactly the type used by government-affiliated engineers documenting infrastructure projects during periods of classified development in New Mexico. Such equipment does not typically end up in a private residential basement by accident. Do you think that the locked room was intentionally used to conceal a secret operation? Share your thoughts. Yet the documents and photographs were only part of the mystery. When Dr. Okonkwo, who was a member of the investigation team, swept her flashlight across the back wall of the underground chamber, the entire rock face was covered in hundreds of dense, razor-sharp engravings. During the initial assessment, she documented more than 300 distinct glyphs. Their geometric precision and deliberate construction created a powerful sense that she was confronting knowledge never meant to be uncovered. When specialists reviewed the photographs, they reached no consensus. One group of symbols closely resembled medieval alchemical figures, including markings linked to John Dee's 1564 work Monas Hieroglyphica. Another appeared similar to advanced technical blueprints far beyond the era suggested by the stonework. A third category matched nothing in any known historical reference. Certain arrangements mirrored stellar maps. If they represent real constellations, they align either with the night sky 12,000 years ago or 12,000 years in the future. The geometry was clearly intentional and reflected an understanding of orbital patterns that should not have existed in the 1800s. The mystery extends beyond a single property. In 2017, researchers at the University of Edinburgh argued that carvings at Turkey's 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe recorded a comet impact and functioned as a calendar tracking Earth's shifting axis long before modern science recognized the phenomenon. If the Hackman engravings use the same cosmic framework, they may represent more than decoration. They could be a wandering, preserved 312 feet underground, behind a hidden entrance, in a structure built to resist intrusion. Some believe the carvings were created by a wealthy eccentric obsessed with alternative history. Others think the wall is an encrypted cipher awaiting the correct key. The most unsettling theory suggests the glyphs contain specialized knowledge passed down through generations of silent guardians, determined to keep certain truths about Earth's past hidden. If that theory is correct, the public story surrounding the property may be little more than a cover for something far older and more disturbing. Even then, the symbols were not the most horrifying discovery inside the chamber. Because the deeper investigators dug into the chamber's origins, the more they were drawn toward a place already famous for hidden projects, classified research, and secrets buried beneath the New Mexico desert. The region surrounding the Hackman compound offers far more than desert vistas and art galleries. Just a short distance away lies Los Alamos, birthplace of nuclear warfare, where the Manhattan Project, atomic experimentation, and some of America's most sensitive military development unfolded. For generations, locals have spoken of extensive underground shelters carved into the desert mesas, reportedly built to protect government leadership during a societal collapse. Public records have confirmed that major subterranean construction projects took place across northern New Mexico during the Cold War, though the full extent of the network remains classified. One documented piece of this history is 109 East Palace Street in Santa Fe. Beginning in 1943, this modest storefront served as the Manhattan Project's main administrative checkpoint. Scientists, engineers, and military officials reported there before being sent to the secret city at Los Alamos. The operation functioned for years in the middle of a civilian community without drawing attention. The state's underground infrastructure extended far beyond that. Manzano Base, built between 1946 and 1949 near Albuquerque, became the nation's primary underground storage and handling facility for atomic weapon components. Carved directly into a mountain, it contained reinforced vaults, high security barriers, and more than 60 access tunnels still visible in satellite imagery. Sensitive nuclear work was conducted there for decades out of public view. Richard Payne, a former Department of Energy evaluator who oversaw structural reviews in northern New Mexico during the 1990s, stated that certain underground facilities were designed to endure long after surface civilization failed. Some were sealed, some filled with concrete, and others disappeared from official records. Asked whether a residence near Santa Fe could sit atop a forgotten corridor, he declined to rule it out. Adding to the mystery, steel discovered beneath the Hackman estate reportedly matched military-grade materials and rivet patterns associated with 1950s government shelter construction. If accurate, the passage may predate Hackman's ownership entirely, suggesting he may have inherited a pre-existing bunker rather than built one himself. If the tunnel existed long before Hackman arrived, had anyone been using it during his ownership? Residents near the compound sensed something was wrong long before the winter of 2025, even if they struggled to explain it. Margaret Calloway, who lived next door, recalled recurring low-frequency vibrations between 2 and 3 in the morning. When she mentioned it to Hackman, he replied that some things were better left beneath the ground. At the time, she dismissed the comment, but later reconsidered its meaning. Former geological researcher Frank Delqua, who lived 2 properties away, detected the same underground frequencies. He installed a mobile seismograph for 6 weeks and found the pulses were mechanical, cyclical, and unlike any natural seismic activity he had studied in 3 decades. Delqua filed a complaint with local authorities in 2019, but the report received no follow-up and was simply archived. Other residents reported seeing unmarked cargo vehicles entering the property after dark and leaving before dawn. No records, invoices, or identifiable personnel were ever linked to these visits. Some former employees also seemed to disappear from public view after leaving the estate. One housekeeper allegedly told a friend she had witnessed prohibited activity on the property, then left the area within a month and was never heard from again. The most puzzling discovery came during renovations that exposed the underground passage. Engineers reportedly found a hardwired communications network embedded within the mansion, separate from modern telecommunications systems. The secure line connected the residence directly to a vault 312 feet below ground and remained operational despite its age. Maintained outside conventional networks, it suggested a long-preserved private connection between the house and the chamber below, though who used it remains unknown. It was sitting on a desk inside Hackman's library. What's on that laptop? When federal agents examined the device found on Hackman's library desk, its contents reportedly triggered a level of federal involvement that exceeded a routine death inquiry. Sources familiar with the investigation claimed the material was directly connected to the underground archive discovered beneath the property. According to these accounts, Hackman was not an unaware owner who stumbled upon the chamber. He had spent years researching its history with patience and precision. The laptop allegedly contained organized research files covering the same historical period represented by documents stored below. Scanned photographs, timelines, correspondence, and detailed summaries suggested a long-term effort rather than casual curiosity. Communications reportedly included historians, archivists, and at least one individual connected to a federal records facility. The work resembled a private investigation into the origins of what lay beneath his home. Those who collaborated with Hackman on historical fiction often described him as a meticulous researcher. He pursued primary sources, contacted experts directly, and treated historical questions with the persistence of an investigative journalist. Taken together, these elements suggest something more than a retirement hobby. They point to a long-term project that Hackman may have spent decades studying, preserving, and preparing others to discover after he was gone. If Hackman truly spent decades investigating the chamber, another possibility emerges. What if everything he had done throughout his life had unknowingly prepared him for this role? Gene Hackman built a cinematic legacy by playing men burdened with dangerous secrets. In The French Connection, The Conversation, Enemy of the State, and Absolute Power, he repeatedly portrayed figures who knew where sensitive truths were buried and what could happen when someone exposed them. During his Hollywood years, audiences saw these roles as the work of a gifted actor drawn to grit, paranoia, and moral tension. Yet viewed through the story of his Santa Fe compound, those performances take on a different weight, as federal agents reportedly moved through the property and descended a concealed stairwell beneath his library. The old characters began to feel less like fiction and more like a pattern. In The Conversation, Hackman played Harry Call, a reclusive surveillance expert convinced that knowledge could be lethal. In Enemy of the State, he became Edward Brill Lyle, a former NSA operative living off-grid inside a protected warehouse while still following intelligence protocols. When Hackman later withdrew to a secluded, high-security estate in New Mexico, many assumed he was echoing those roles in private life. Another reading is that the relationship ran in reverse. The roles may have trained him to understand the mindset he would one day need. Under that interpretation, his retirement was not merely an escape from fame. It became a watchpost in the desert, positioned above a tunnel below his library, linked by private communications to a deep vault containing records said to date back to 1937. His final years were spent organizing investigative material on a computer that federal agents would later remove in a secure container. The man who so often played the guardian of dangerous truths may have ended his life occupying that role for real. With his death, that guardianship ended. What happened next remains one of the most puzzling parts of the entire story. The discovery was made. Specialists were called in, and yet the flow of information seemed to stop completely. FBI forensic teams are reportedly still examining the site, analyzing every artifact, document, and symbol within the chamber. Linguists, metallurgists, historians, and even astrophysicists are said to be studying its contents. Months have passed since the alleged discovery, yet no verified leaks, preliminary findings, or anonymous briefings have surfaced. Such complete silence is unusual, leading some to argue that the chamber's contents are considered sensitive enough to justify extraordinary containment. The danger, according to this theory, is not physical but informational. Certain discoveries can become disruptive when they challenge accepted historical narratives or raise questions that powerful institutions would rather leave unanswered. In that sense, the chamber is portrayed not as a weapon, but as a locked archive whose contents could alter established assumptions. Supporters of this view believe that beneath estates, mountains, forests, and towns lie places never intended for public access. They argue that Hackman spent decades protecting one of them. The security systems, isolation, legal protections, and secrecy surrounding the property are presented as evidence of a life organized around guarding whatever existed below. Now, Hackman is gone. The person who said to know every corridor of the tunnel, every crate in the chamber, and every marking on its walls can no longer explain what was there. Whatever allegedly lay beyond the iron barrier beneath his library is no longer his responsibility to protect. For those who accept the story, the central question is not whether authorities understand what was found. It is whether the discovery was considered significant enough that silence became preferable to disclosure. Was Hackman the last guardian of something buried long before he was born? Or was he its final prisoner? Drop your theory in the comments below. And if you want to continue exploring the mysteries around us, check out my video about Antarctica, where terrifying truths are revealed. Click on the card shown on the screen now, or find the link in the description. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming journeys. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed creating it. See you in the next video.
There is something wrong with this place. The pine trees grow twisted. The frogs have unusual colors. A bird flies by, its beak warped. Spring of 1986. In the middle of the night, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, reactor number 4 has just exploded, spewing iodine and cesium high into the air. This incident shattered the usual quiet night atmosphere of the forest, and it also destroyed the peaceful lives of many humans and creatures alike. Humans could leave, staying away from the radioactive zone, but the other creatures could not. They were forced to stay in the heart of the largest nuclear exclusion zone on Earth. As time passed, the radiation gradually altered every cell in the remaining creatures in Chernobyl and mutated them in bizarre ways. The first victims of the disaster were humans. In reality, it was not only creatures at Chernobyl after the disaster. In the following weeks, between 300,000 and 600,000 people were sent here to clean up. They were called the liquidators. Here, the term liquidator carries a dark meaning. Their job was to liquidate the radioactive material itself. Firefighters, miners, soldiers, civilians. So how did their work unfold? A firefighter named Igor described peeling back the contaminated topsoil like rolling up a carpet, then dumping it into unprotected open pits. It is estimated that about 40,000 people died, and around 70,000 survivors were disabled. A chemist named Alexander Lashko spent 30 days inside the contaminated zone. Out of 400 people working with him, he said only 120 survived. Within just 1 month, 5 of those mechanics died. Most of the names of the liquidators were never recorded. They prevented a disaster that could have claimed the lives of millions, but history has largely forgotten them, which is hard to accept. Humans certainly cannot avoid loss after a disaster. Do you know anyone or any stories about those who sacrificed themselves trying to prevent the disaster from worsening? Please share so more people can remember them. If you want to find the most heavily radiated animal still living in that area, the wild boar would be a strong candidate. Among all the species living there, they are one of the most heavily radiated, and it all stems from their food. Wild boars are diggers. They root through the soil for insects, mushrooms, and especially deer truffles. The problem is that the soil here is still contaminated, and the underground truffles absorb radiation like little sponges. So the boars eat, and the radiation silently accumulates inside their bodies day after day. Accumulating too much radiation in their bodies, these wild boars have strange tumors, lumps, and physical deformities. Nothing like in comic books, no extra legs, but their bodies are clearly weakened. Their immune systems are compromised, and they suffer from bizarre internal organ issues. However, they still survive. They reproduce. Some even wander out of the zone and mingle with wild boar populations elsewhere in Europe, carrying their radiation with them, which is quite concerning. They are not exactly thriving, but they refuse to disappear, and they do not stay behind the fence. If spiders already make you uneasy, the spiders inside this zone will make you even more anxious. Here, spiders are radioactive. As they spin their webs across the dead forest, they add another layer of danger to a place already overflowing with peril. Normally, spider webs should be neat and predictable, the same regular spiral repeated over and over. But some webs here are abnormal. They are tangled and uneven, woven into strange, abstract shapes that some researchers suggest could be caused by genetic damage. What is clear is that the spiders themselves carry radiation in their bodies, and so do the webs they leave behind, making even a light touch potentially dangerous for any passing animal. There is currently no evidence showing that a twisted web means the spider is mutated. It could be due to stress. It could also be something else entirely. But standing in that forest, looking at a web woven in a shape that should not exist, it is hard not to wonder what is happening inside those tiny bodies. Are you afraid of spiders? Comment yes or no so we can tally up the numbers and see which team has more people. A special point worth mentioning when talking about Chernobyl is that while this place is no longer safe for human habitation, there are many species thriving in this environment. After the explosion, this area was considered a desolate wasteland that could never recover. That is what people predicted. But one species of wild horse decided otherwise. They are called Przewalski horses, often described as the last truly wild horses on the planet, and by the late 1960s, they had almost disappeared. In 1998, conservationists released about 10 males and 18 females into Chernobyl as a last hope to save the species. So what happened to them? Instead of dying off, they multiplied. By 2018, their population had grown to about 150. This is what puzzles scientists. These horses usually prefer wide-open plains, but in Chernobyl, some choose to live in the most heavily contaminated forests, and they seem to remain healthy. No one can fully explain it. Perhaps the radiation levels there are lower than we think. Perhaps their bodies repair damage faster than ours. Although research is still in its early stages, these findings are enough to make you pause and wonder what these animals know that we do not. Besides the giant catfish in the cooling ponds, the smaller fish in the rivers and lakes around Pripyat also have their own disturbing story. Researchers have described fish missing eyes, having tumors bulging from their bodies, or simply having abnormal structures, taking on bizarre shapes that are hard to look at. The radioactive material settled into the silt at the bottom, then crept into the food chain. Small aquatic creatures absorbed it. The fish that ate them absorbed even more. Such continuous exposure affects cell division and development, and over time, you end up with fish that look, frankly speaking, like cartoon creatures. Then there is the damage you cannot see. Some are born sterile. Others simply do not live as long as they normally would. However, there are still many of them swimming around. Would you dare to cast a fishing line into the waters of Pripyat knowing what swims underneath? Let me know your thoughts below. If you want clear, visual proof that Chernobyl alters living things, look at the firebugs. These are small red and black insects, and normally they are very easy to recognize because the pattern on their backs is very detailed and uniform. You will recognize them as soon as you see them. But inside the exclusion zone, researchers started finding firebugs that looked abnormal. Their markings were scrambled. Some had patterns in the wrong places. Others were entirely missing pieces of their patterns. Scientists Timothy Mousseau and Anders Moeller conducted a study and found that the bugs living closer to the reactor were more likely to display these defects. They photographed a large number of them and lined them up next to firebugs from outside the zone. The difference is very hard to ignore. It is not the most dramatic mutation on this list, but it is one of the clearest cases of Chernobyl deformities ever captured on camera. In the shadow of nuclear catastrophe, not all living things withered and deformed. More frighteningly, some species thrived to a terrifying degree. Deep within the radiation-contaminated wasteland of the Red Forest, certain ferns, mosses, and fungi mutated into grotesque giants. Nuclear fallout had essentially hijacked the DNA that regulates plant growth. Instead of dying, the intense radiation switched off the genetic switches that dictate when an individual should stop growing. The result? Unusual, sprawling giants, with swollen trunks and enormous, bizarre leaves, a distorted testament to nature's post-apocalyptic resilience, activating latent ancestral traits. However, this enormous growth concealed a deadly secret. These towering plant anomalies weren't actually thriving. They acted as heavily contaminated radioactive sponges. The larger they grew, the more heavily they were contaminated with radiation. Przewalski horses are not the only species unaffected negatively by the radiation levels here. On the walls of reactor number 4, workers discovered something growing, a type of black fungus, clinging to some of the most radioactive surfaces in the building. It turns out this fungus does not just tolerate radiation, it might actually be absorbing radiation. The secret seems to lie in melanin, the same pigment that colors our skin and hair. In our bodies, melanin protects against the sun. In the fungus, researchers believe it captures radiation and converts it into energy, much like how a plant uses light to grow. Some people have nicknamed it radiosynthesis. It thrives exactly where everything else withers. Whether this fungus is cleaning the area or simply living off it, it is a true reminder that life finds doors we did not know existed. But one undeniable fact is that cases of normal development in heavily radiated environments are only a minority among the many creatures here. There are many other species. They might still be alive, but they are no longer as they were before. The wolves in Chernobyl are not just trying to survive. They might be evolving. In 2014, Dr. Kara Love and her team from Princeton attached GPS collars to several wolves. Those collars not only tracked movement, but also measured radiation in real time, and the numbers were terrifying. These wolves absorb 6 times the safe radiation limit allowed for humans every day. That should be fatal. But the wolves seem to be adapting. Blood samples show changes in their immune systems, similar to what you would see in a person undergoing radiation therapy. Even more strangely, certain parts of their DNA seem to be changing to fight cancer. In a place where the risk of cancer should be incredibly high, these animals might be building their own defense systems. If these initial findings are confirmed, then perhaps, one day, we could find a way to fight cancer in humans. That is a big assumption, but it is enough to make you stop and think. Before we continue exploring the dark secrets of the Forbidden Zone, if you're fascinated by the world's unsolved mysteries, please take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends. That really helps us bring you even more stories. Right next to the plant is the most severely affected forest. People call it the blood red forest. When reactor number 4 exploded, a dense radioactive cloud drifted right through these pines. In just a few hours, the needles turned rusty red, and the trees died. That part you could probably guess. But here is the truly disturbing part. The dead trees do not decompose at all. In a normal forest, leaves and wood from 20 years ago should have disappeared long ago, broken down by insects, fungi, and microorganisms. So scientists conducted a bizarre experiment. They filled bags with clean fallen leaves and left them in both healthy and contaminated areas for nearly a year. In clean areas, 70 to 90% of the leaves decomposed. In the red forest, the leaves retained about 60% of their weight. The radiation sterilized the forest floor, killing the very organisms that cause decomposition. So now, nothing decays anymore. The entire forest just sits there, dry and intact. This is actually more dangerous than you think, because it only takes one spark, and that contamination could travel with the smoke far beyond the fences to very distant areas unstoppably. Now, let us go back to a few days before the reactor exploded to explore an anomaly reported by people. Several workers at the plant reported seeing a strange object in the sky. According to accounts, it was a terrifying sight. They spoke of a large, dark creature with massive wings, soaring through the air, with glowing red eyes and somehow no visible head. They called it the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Those who saw it said they were haunted by nightmares, and a few reported receiving strange, threatening phone calls from someone they could not identify. Years later, in 2007, workers again reported a similar dark shape. Some locals link it to the Mothman, a winged figure supposedly appearing right before disasters strike. Others claim the whole story is a fabrication to scare looters away from the area. There are no photographs, no bodies, no evidence, only a handful of deeply shaken people, and a legend that refuses to die. The night of the disaster, after the cooling system was shut off and the test failed, the reactor core melted down. The fuel rods, their casings, the containment vessel, even the concrete floor, all melted. Normally, concrete and steel are what keep a reactor solid. Here, they became a rushing stream of radioactive lava. When the fire reached about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, about 1,000 degrees Celsius, the entire mass began burning its way downward, crawling through the building at a speed of about 20 centimeters per hour, about 30 centimeters per hour. People feared it would seep into the groundwater and make everything much worse. But it stopped. After about 2.7 meters, as it cooled down to about 2,000 degrees Celsius, the lava hardened into the famous elephant foot shape. So that is it, right? Not quite. 10 years later, scientists studying that mass found something they did not expect. A completely new material, never seen before. A uranium-zirconium silicate, now called Chernobylite. It is extremely radioactive and can remain so for centuries. A disaster of such magnitude does not just destroy, it also silently creates something the world has never seen. In 2016, two Spanish researchers, Pablo Barraco and Germán Orizola, were studying the recovery of life around Pripyat. Then they discovered something strange: black frogs. Normally, a dark-colored frog is nothing special, but these are eastern tree frogs, a species that is usually bright green. So why did they turn almost black? The leading theory is that this is rapid evolution, driven by radiation. The dark color comes from excess melanin. In these frogs, that pigment might help protect their cells from radiation damage. The darker-colored frogs survived a little better, reproduced a little more, and gradually change the entire population. This is one of the clearest examples of nature adapting rapidly. If you've watched this far, it means you're genuinely interested. Don't just like it, hype it up too. It only takes a few seconds, but it will help this video go much further. Jeremy Wade, a specialist in studying giant river creatures, caught a giant catfish in the cooling ponds near the Chernobyl plant. They were all contaminated with radiation. Wade noted that the fish he caught had radiation levels about 16 times higher than normal. But what surprised everyone most was their enormous size. The answer to this size is simply that the water is isolated. This means the catfish are at the top of the food chain. There are no predators and an abundant food source. They are even fed leftovers. A fish can live like that for decades, unhunted, and it continues to grow. They also live longer here, which further contributes to their enormous size. That doesn't mean the radiation isn't harmful. Clearly, they are absorbing radiation, and scientists are still studying the damage that we can't see from the outside. But its enormous size is probably due to a comfortable life, rather than a mutation like in the comics. Either way, a fish as long as an adult human, living in a place where almost nothing can survive, is indeed a disturbing sight. When people fled the disaster, most pets were left behind, especially dogs. Over the decades, those abandoned animals have turned into large packs, roaming the affected zone and the surrounding lands. A recent study from the University of South Carolina and the National Human Genome Research Institute took a close look at 302 dogs, trying to understand how radiation over multiple generations has shaped their bodies. They might be doing surprisingly well. Unlike some other animals that struggle to reproduce, these dogs are breeding normally, raising their pups and living their lives. Scientists suspect they may have developed radiation resistance, and there is even early evidence showing they get cancer less often. No one is calling them invincible, but if these dogs have truly adapted to one of the deadliest threats on Earth, it means their biology might be silently recalibrating to cope with it. The real tragedy of Chernobyl was not just the meltdown of reactor number 4, but also the deadly silence. The severe lack of communication and the blind ignorance of the dangers of the safety test pushed this facility to its doom. As the radioactive fallout spread, the Soviet Union chose secrecy over survival. We have seen how creatures adapted to extreme living environments. Some species thrive, but many others fail. What about humans? In harsh environments, can humans adapt and develop superpowers for themselves? The answer is yes. The clearest answer and proof for this I have placed in the next video. Let us head there together. Antarctica is the most photographed place on Earth that almost no one has actually seen. It is larger than the United States and Mexico combined, covered by an ice sheet nearly 1 meter thick, guarded by winds faster than race cars, and a